Chapter 2101. Looking at the strange Valley of Despair, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. From Lang Kuan's memory, Yi Xian knew that the Valley of Despair was divided into 5 levels. The core was the tomb of the god of sin. After that was the inner valley, the outer valley, and the heavenly gorge. And the outer area where Yi Xian was now. Lang Kuan and the others had been defeated at the heavenly gorge. In other words, if Yi Xian continued to move forward, he would most likely end up like them. What should he do? Give up on the mission of reforging the system? Stop exploring this place? No. Yi Xian would never do that. If the system could not be repaired, then Yi Xian would find it even harder to move forward. Sometimes, when it was time to take risks, they had to take them. Yi Xian would not give up this opportunity. Although he knew that once he started to explore this place, all kinds of strange things would happen, and all kinds of powerful demons and ghosts would appear continuously, as well as those strange restrictions, formations, and even things like the ancient tree of Soul Devourer. But Yi Xian wanted to give it a try. Was it dangerous? Yes, it was. But wasn't danger meant to be conquered? Since he had made up his mind, Yi Xian did not waste any more time and directly walked forward. Step by step, every step, Yi Xian was very careful. As he continued to go deeper, he could clearly feel that the violent aura in the air was getting stronger and stronger. But fortunately, Yi Xian already knew what the simplest way to deal with this violent aura was. To put it bluntly, it was to not absorb the aura in the air. Perhaps it would be difficult for others to do so. But for Yi Xian, it was easy for him to do so. Others, regardless of whether they use supernatural powers or techniques, would inevitably need to borrow the power of the void, and would inevitably be infected by the violent aura in the air. But Yi Xian did not have to worry about this. First of all, he had just come to the realm of the gods. Strictly speaking, Yi Xian did not have supernatural powers at all. What Yi Xian could use now was the Godslayer's attack, the Devouring Hand, and the Eye of Revelation. In fact, even the sword servants did not need Yi Xian to borrow power from the void. Naturally, Yi Xian was able to ignore this berserk aura. There wasn't much danger in the outer region. Although they would encounter some strange demon gods along the way, they were more or less the same as Lang Kuan. He was just pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Yi Xian directly devoured him, and he even got a few universe rings along the way. In the Valley of Despair, as long as you used your divine power in battle, you would inevitably be infected by the berserk aura. Only those demonic beasts with no strength at all could live here. Of course, if it was a demonic beast, it would not be a threat to Yi Xian at all. Until Yi Xian reached the entrance of the heavenly gorge. Tongtian Gorge. Just like its name, it was a canyon that extended into the sky. This canyon was built on top of an incomparably huge divine mountain. How high was the mountain? No one knew. At least, Yi Xian and those unlucky fellows who were devoured by Yi Xian did not know. Perhaps the tomb of the god of the gods was at the top of the mountain. It was just that no one had been there, so naturally no one knew. Yi Xian knew that starting from the Tongtian Gorge, the dangers along the way had begun. It was no longer just the souls of the dead or the berserk aura. Here, there would be all kinds of restrictions and formations, or attacks from strange beasts. We're finally here. Then, I want to see how powerful this so-called heavenly gorge is. Yi Xian held the god-slaying sword in his hand. Without any hesitation, he directly took a step forward. In an instant, the sky changed color. From the moment he stepped into the Tongtian Gorge, the surrounding scenery changed completely. Of course, Yi Xian was already mentally prepared for this. In fact, what Yi Xian saw now was the true appearance of the Valley of Despair. Withered trees, broken stones, corpses, blood moon, and chilly wind. It formed a strange scene, but at the same time, it was accompanied by countless dangers. In front is the first obstacle, the Sea of Bones. Once you step in, there will be countless skeletons appearing. There is no other way except to break through. The strength of these skeletons, from ordinary skeletons with no cultivation, to the cultivation of lower 9th grade deity. Whether you can break through or not depends entirely on your own ability. Yi Xian said indifferently. However, there was no hesitation in his feet. This was a section of the canyon, a section that did not seem to have many special features. Of course, except for the caves on the surrounding walls. When Yi Xian finally entered, countless skeletons began to appear in the caves. Under the light of the blood moon, the skeletons turned dark red. A bloody dark red. Not a sound was heard. These skeletons could not open their mouths to speak. From the moment they saw Yi Xian, they launched a surprise attack. The skeletons rushed toward Yi Xian like a tide. Limitless. No one knew if there were 100,000 or 1,000,000 of them. These skeletons were the incarnations of countless people who were sacrificed to the ancient gods when they were building the tomb of the god of sin. Kill! In the canyon, which had been quiet for God knows how many years, there was finally a voice. Yi Xian had already rushed forward. Ding! A special treasure is detected, the skeleton's heart. It is recommended that the host obtain it immediately. Suddenly, the system's voice sounded. To be honest, it was a good feeling to hear a familiar voice in such an empty place. Moreover, after the system malfunctioned, it seemed to have become more humane. It could even give suggestions. One should know that previously, the system would always give out cold notifications and give Yi Xian all kinds of trouble. For example, it would create a bloodline holder and chase after Yi Xian. But then again, what was this skeleton's heart? Of course, since the system suggested to obtain it, it could not be a bad thing. Yi Xian looked over. Good heavens, a giant skeleton of 100 meters tall was walking toward Yi Xian. This guy's bones were extremely thick and strong. Every step he took would send hundreds of skeletons in front of him flying. In his hand, he was holding a skeletal long sword. What the hell was that? Yi Xian did not know. But he knew that the thing with a faint blood-red glow on the chest of this giant skeleton was the so-called skeleton's heart. He waved the deicide again. Hundreds of skeletons were chopped into pieces. Yi Xian also rushed toward the giant skeleton. Deicide slash. In an instant, the deicide slash's special effect was activated. Against a demon god like a skeleton, the critical hit rate was 100%. With a loud bang, the giant skeleton was directly chopped into pieces by Yi Xian. Killed with one strike. In a flash, Yi Xian picked up the skeleton's heart. Chapter 2102. Skeleton Heart. Special material, can be used on withered bone sword servants. 3 skeleton hearts. 1 withered bone sword servant. There is no limit to the number of withered bone sword servants. The host can increase the number without limit. Withered bone sword servants were divided into 9 levels. Each level up would consume a certain amount of skeleton hearts. Withered bone sword servants had strong defensive abilities but average offensive abilities. If they died in battle, 1 skeleton heart could be used to revive them. After revival, they would retain their original level. Yes, this skeleton heart was actually a necessary material for a special withered bone sword servant. However, this withered bone sword servant was not very strong. Not only could it not level up with Yi Xian, but the key was that its starting level was very low. To put it bluntly, Yi Xian would need to use a sword servant of low-level god cultivation at the very least. Alright, then, this level 3 withered bone sword servant was a low-level god. As for the level 4 withered bone sword servant, it was only an early-level god. It was a little useless. However, what if the number of skeleton hearts was huge? Yi Xian looked at the sea of countless skeletons. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Good stuff. These 1,000,000 skeletons were simply delivering food to him. How many skeleton hearts could there be among 1,000,000 skeletons? Yi Xian did not know, but he knew that this time, he would definitely gain a lot of benefits. Kill. There was no rest, no end, no light. Due to the restrictions of the violent aura, Yi Xian could only use the god-slaying sword to kill these skeletons. However, the god-slaying sword's terrifying attributes would definitely deal a critical hit to any god other than the gods of the human race. It was easy for Yi Xian to kill these skeletons. Yi Xian stood on the corpse of a huge skeleton and swept his sword. Countless skeletons shattered on the ground. At this time, the entire canyon was filled with countless white bones. The number of holes was also decreasing. Mana 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 hada. A strange sound was heard. It seemed to be some kind of incantation. Yi Xian suddenly looked forward. He saw that the nameless black-cloaked guys were gathered together and chanting. What's going on? What the hell were those guys? Suddenly, the skeleton beneath Yi Xian's feet moved slightly. It was actually being revived. Damn it! We can't let them revive these skeletons. Yi Xian was shocked. If the black-cloaked man resurrected the skeletons in this canyon, how could he pass through Yi Xian? His figure moved. Yi Xian had already rushed forward without a care in the world. Boom! With a casual swing of his sword, he shattered a huge skeleton. However, this time, Yi Xian did not even collect the skeleton's heart. He simply passed through the sky full of broken bones. His footsteps did not stop at all as he continued to charge forward. Boom boom boom. Yi Xian leaped high into the air. Within this damned canyon, there was a restriction on flight, making it impossible for Yi Xian to fly. However, even if he couldn't fly, he could still jump. Every time he jumped, a group of skeletons would be directly shattered by Yi Xian's immense strength. Yi Xian did not dare to slow down for even a moment. At this time, half of the hundreds of thousands of skeletons that Yi Xian had killed with great difficulty had already stood up shakily. The last time he killed them, Yi Xian had already felt helpless. If this happened again, Yi Xian would really want to go berserk. He must not let them succeed. Go to hell. I don't care what the hell you are. Yi Xian suddenly jumped up. This jump was at least 100 meters high. The restriction on flight had been activated. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not flying, nor was he using any divine power. Therefore, even the restriction on flight could not do anything to Yi Xian. Deity slaying slash. Boom! Under the illumination of the blood moon, a powerful ray of light directly slashed at the 5 black-cloaked men. Boom boom boom. There was a continuous sound. Yi Xian's angry sword slashed a canyon in the Tongtian Gorge. And the 5 black-cloaked men were killed without any suspense. Yi Xian landed and was already beside the 5 men. However, he threw away the cloak. Yi Xian was shocked to find that it was empty. Except for the 5 weird-looking skeleton hearts, there was nothing else, not even a bone. What the hell was this? Of course, Yi Xian did not care so much. After keeping the 5 special skeleton hearts, Yi Xian continued to kill the sea of skeletons. The battle lasted for 3 whole days. Of course, killing millions of skeletons in 3 days, including countless low-level gods, did not take into account his combat strength. His endurance was not something that ordinary people could withstand. However, after Yi Xian killed all the skeletons, he had a different idea. One should know that in a place like this, there should not only be low-level god skeletons. Then there was only one possibility. This was not the only place where such a test was held. Of course, Yi Xian did not mind at all. This time, although he did not get any rare treasures, and his level did not increase at all. However, he got more than 130 normal skeleton hearts and 5 special skeleton hearts. This thing was a good thing. No matter what, he had to get the skeleton swordsman. Especially in a place like this where there was constant danger, it might have an unexpected effect. System, I want the skeleton swordsman now. Yi Xian immediately said in his mind. Although the name was skeleton swordsman and Yi Xian called it skeleton swordsman, it was not wrong. Ding, the host can use 3 skeleton hearts to level 1 skeleton swordsman. Okay, one first. In an instant, the 3 skeleton hearts disappeared, and then a skeleton walked out. That's so ugly. Yi Xian was helpless. Of course, it was only for temporary use anyway, so Yi Xian was not that particular about it. System, I want to level up this skeleton swordsman. Ding, skeleton swordsman level 1 to level 2 requires 10 skeleton hearts. Okay, level up. System, continue to level up. Level 1 to level 2 required 10 skeleton hearts, and level 2 to level 3 required 50 skeleton hearts. Of course, Yi Xian had more than 100 skeleton hearts, so he did not feel the pinch. Yi Xian did not make too many. 1 skeleton swordsman was enough for him now. He would save the extra skeleton hearts for resurrection. However, what were the 5 special skeleton hearts? Ding, skeleton spirit. Essential material for the skeleton king. Currently, the host does not have enough materials. Specific information is temporarily unknown. Well, it seems that this so-called skeleton spirit is the upgraded version of the skeleton heart. Yi Xian put away his doubts. He continued to move forward. Of course, this time, he let the skeleton swordsman lead the way. It was a little ugly, but it was good as long as it was useful. Yi Xian had just entered this place, and he had already obtained a skeleton swordsman. Then, what else could Yi Xian obtain? Chapter 2103. Of course, the Tongtian Gorge was not that simple. The millions of skeletons were just the appetizer. Yi Xian continued forward. After walking for less than 2 hours, he encountered another problem. The withered bone sword servant was leading the way. However, a huge bloody maw suddenly opened up on the originally ordinary ground and swallowed the withered bone sword servant in one gulp. Ding! The withered bone sword servant has died. Ding! The host used a skeleton heart to revive the withered bone sword servant. Damn! Yi Xian was speechless. Just now, everything had happened too quickly. It was so fast that Yi Xian didn't even understand what had happened. When the withered bone sword servant resurrected again, it was as if nothing had happened on the ground in front of it. It was as if that bloody mouth had never appeared at all. No, this time, Yi Xian had to see what was going on. The withered bone sword servant continued forward. This time, it was much more careful. Yi Xian also carefully observed his surroundings. 1 step, 2 steps. The withered bone sword servant walked forward step by step as if nothing had happened. However, just as Yi Xian was slightly relieved, the bloody maw appeared once again. In an instant, the withered bone sword servant was swallowed again. Ding! The withered bone sword servant has died. Ding! The host used a skeleton heart to revive the withered bone sword servant. What the hell? Yi Xian was speechless. This time, he saw it clearly. However, the key was that he did not know what this thing was. Was it some kind of demon god? It did not look like one at all because other than a huge mouth, it did not even have a body. This thing was made up of incomparably sharp teeth. Round and round like a spiral. After the withered bone sword servant was swallowed, the teeth inside began to spin rapidly. What was the withered bone sword servant's strongest ability? It was defense. It could be said that although Yi Xian's 3rd-level withered bone sword servant only had the strength of a lesser god, its defense was comparable to that of a greater god. However, even so, it did not last more than a second against the rapidly spinning teeth. What a terrifying thing! Yi Xian was able to get a preliminary result from his analysis. There was only one conclusion, and that was that this thing was not a living thing at all, but a mechanism that was trapped inside. Damn! How was he going to play this? If it was a demon god, then Yi Xian could kill it. But if it was a trap mechanism, then it would be difficult to deal with. Yi Xian did not dare to take the risk. These kinds of mechanisms were all triggered, so the withered bone sword servants would be fine even if they walked past them. But when it was Ye's turn, it would be dangerous. This thing was not easy to get. Yi Xian fell silent. There was a restriction in the air that prevented Yi Xian from flying through the air. On the ground, danger lurked everywhere. What a tragedy! Could it be that Yi Xian would be stopped here? That was impossible. Since it was a mechanism, there must be a way to break it. System: give me 10 first-level withered bone sword servants. As long as he had skeleton hearts, he could have an unlimited number of withered bone sword servants. Although a rank 1 withered bone sword attendant was completely useless, it was still very useful for scouting the way and finding traps in the current situation. Yi Xian was going to use these withered bone sword servants to investigate carefully. The 10 first-level withered bone sword servants appeared quickly. Under Yi Xian's command, they began to explore the surroundings. As long as they could find the switch or trigger conditions, they would be able to pass through the trap. In that case, he would be able to pass. What Yi Xian needed to do now was find the crux of the matter. The withered bone sword servants died again and again, reducing the number of skeleton hearts in Yi Xian's hands. Suddenly, the death of a withered bone sword servant attracted Yi Xian's attention. No, this withered bone sword servant died a bit later than the other withered bone sword servants. Even the activation of the trap was slower. Someone is controlling this place. In an instant, Yi Xian thought of a possibility. A possibility that did not seem very likely. The trap here was not triggered. Someone was controlling it. In that case, since he understood this point, the following matters would be much easier to handle. The withered bone sword attendants set off again. This time they were very spread out, and they were searching everywhere. Yi Xian wanted to find out who was hiding in the dark and plotting against him. Fortunately, these withered bone sword servants were there. Otherwise, if Yi Xian himself was there, the consequences would be unimaginable if he fell into the trap. It's here! Suddenly, Yi Xian and all the withered bone sword servants focused their attention on a large black rock. This stone, every time the mechanism was activated, it would emit a faint fluctuation. Although the vibration was not very strong. However, Yi Xian's sharp senses were able to detect it. Humph, I want to see how you're going to hide this time. Kill. Yi Xian casually waved his hand, and the God Realm Withered Bone Sword attendant, who had been waiting for orders, suddenly charged forward. He directly used a fearless frontal charge to collide with a huge rock. Boom! A ferocious explosion took place. In an instant, the rock and the Withered Bone Sword servants were smashed to pieces. The guy hiding in the rock finally revealed his true form. It was another skeleton. It was a strange skeleton wearing a maroon robe with a skeleton spirit in each of its eyes. In the skeleton's hand was a golden crystal. That was the source of control for the trap here. Haha, I've found your true form. I want to see where you're going to hide this time. The skeleton controlling the trap did not have a strong cultivation base. His only purpose was to control the trap here. Once discovered, he would not have any combat power. He killed the skeleton with one strike. The skeleton could not withstand Yi Xian's attack. Yi Xian held the golden crystal in his hand. However, he did not choose to devour it. Now, Yi Xian had an inexplicable feeling in his heart. He felt that perhaps the fundamental purpose of every checkpoint here was not to eliminate the people who entered this place, but to test the people who entered. Although this feeling was completely baseless. However, since he had this intuition, Yi Xian would leave something behind. Therefore, Yi Xian left the golden crystal behind. As expected, there was no one controlling it. That ferocious giant mouth didn't appear again. Yi Xian had passed this trap. He continued forward. Chapter 2104. However, this time, Yi Xian's test was a bridge. It was a strange bridge. The bridge was surrounded by a highly corrosive poisonous fog. Even the strongest third-level Withered Bone Sword servant could not last more than 3 seconds. Even if Yi Xian were to travel at full speed, he would not be able to cross the bridge in less than an hour. To put it bluntly, this poisonous fog was a place where no one was allowed to pass. There was a bridge in the middle of the poisonous fog. A strange iron chain bridge. Why was this bridge strange? Because on both sides of the bridge were sculptures of various demonic beasts. Once an outsider approached, these sculptures would immediately wake up and attack the person in front of them without hesitation. How long was this bridge? More than 1,000,000 meters. On top of that, there was a pair of such sculptures every 10 meters. That iron chain wasn't an ordinary iron chain. These iron chains contained a special kind of energy. This bridge was made up of a total of 16 iron chains. Between every 2 iron chains, a strange light would be emitted. When a person stood on the light, it was as if they were standing on flat ground. Of course, one had to keep moving forward. If one stood in the same position for too long, one would see the light turn from white to red. When it turned red, not only would it explode with a powerful alien flame attack, but it would also break apart. One of Yi Xian's Withered Bone Sword servant had fallen into the invincible abyss because of this sudden break in the light curtain. Was this the new test? Then let's fight. It seemed that they were thinking too much if they wanted to rely on these sculptures to stop Yi Xian. When Yi Xian successfully passed through this place, he was even more certain in his heart that this was definitely a specially designed training ground. This was because Yi Xian had encountered a pair of upper-level true god demonic beasts at the end of the iron chain bridge. The only thing that Yi Xian regretted was that these sculptures did not have any devouring value. Therefore, Yi Xian did not increase his cultivation level at all. When Yi Xian finally passed the iron chain bridge, he arrived at the final test of the Heavenly Gorge. This time around, it could be considered a real test. That was because this time, the rules were clearly written down. A stone tablet. A huge stone tablet that was more than 10 meters tall. When Yi Xian reached this place, an illusory figure suddenly appeared on the stone tablet. The figure was so blurry that Yi Xian could not see its appearance clearly. Welcome, 76,872 trial takers. Congratulations on entering the Sovereign's endless trial left behind by our great master. Once you begin, unless you pass, you will be trapped forever. Of course, if you pass this trial, you will obtain unimaginable benefits. I am the guardian of the first trial. If you pass this trial, you will be able to obtain one of my master's inheritances. Work hard, trial taker. It has been a long time since someone passed through here. I look forward to seeing your performance. The illusory figure did not say much, but it made Yi Xian heave a sigh of relief. After confirming that this was a trial, there was no doubt that Yi Xian would be much safer. At the same time, this also represented infinite opportunities. Yi Xian already knew that this was a trial left behind by an ancient god. The things that the ancient god left behind were probably not ordinary things. Although he did not know why he had inexplicably entered this place, he had to admit that this was an opportunity. The Valley of Despair that was rumored to be a trial by an ancient god was actually a trial by fire. He did not know how many people would be attracted to this place if this news spread. Of course, it was superfluous to say this now. At this time, Yi Xian was already prepared. He stepped into the first trial. Seal Mountain. Seal Mountain was a mysterious mountain covered with all kinds of seals. If one said that it was big, it was indeed incomparably huge. If one said that it was small, in fact, what the naked eye could see was only a palm-sized rockery. Everything was because of the seals on it. To be precise, this mountain itself was actually just a projection in the void. When Yi Xian stepped into it, it could be said that he existed in the Valley of Despair, but it could also be said that he had already been transported to another alternate space. There were a total of 990,000 seals in Seal Mountain. There were even more types of seals, but they all had one thing in common, and that was that each seal sealed a treasure. Whether it was a natural treasure or a magic weapon, as long as one could open the seal, he would be able to obtain the item inside. It could be said that there was no danger here. Of course, the difficulty of the seals increased as one went to the top of the mountain. Ding! Congratulations to the host for opening the seal and obtaining the destruction stone. The system's notification instantly made Yi Xian slightly stunned. It's actually the destruction stone. Yi Xian held the stone in his hand and was rather surprised. This is good stuff. This destruction stone is one of the basic materials of the shadow guards and sword servants. Yi Xian casually put away the destruction stone, feeling extremely happy. Shadow guards and sword servants were not something that the withered bone sword servants could compare to. Although the withered bone sword servants had strong defensive abilities and the possibility of self-leveling up, they were still very weak. In other words, if Yi Xian had enough skeleton hearts, even at his current stage, he could create a super invincible withered bone sword servant. It was a pity that the skeleton hearts were not so easy to obtain. However, shadow guards and sword servants were different. They had 3 special abilities: Undying, Incorporeal, and Coexistence. Undying was easy to understand. It was unlimited resurrection. Incorporeal was easy to understand. It was permanent invisibility. The key was coexistence. The coexistence ability of the shadow guards and sword servants referred to the ability to completely enhance Yi Xian's combat power. Moreover, regardless of whether it was the realm or ability growth, even if Yi Xian used any equipment, the shadow guards and sword servants would automatically duplicate a set. Such a powerful sword servant, just this coexistence ability alone was enough to make Yi Xian jealous. This sword servant had to be summoned. Such a terrifying ability had to be used by Yi Xian. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the countless restrictions. His hands moved even faster. Ding! Congratulations to the host for unlocking the 1000th restriction and completing the system recovery hidden subtask. The system recovery rate has increased by 5%. Ding! The system's ability to break restrictions has been unlocked. Unknowingly, Yi Xian had unlocked the 1000th restriction? Of course, he had relied on the black all that he had bought from Ling Xian Court. However, the system did not care so much. As long as it was Yi Xian who had unlocked the restriction, it was fine. Why would it care what he had used? Hidden subtask? Yi Xian's lips curled slightly. This system was really good at causing trouble. Apart from the main system recovery task, there were also some hidden subtasks that could also restore the system. Chapter 2105. All of a sudden, Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the Forbidden Mountain. He smiled proudly. No matter what happened to the other people who entered this place, as far as Yi Xian was concerned, he was definitely going to pass this restriction mountain. Yi Xian was going to take all 990,000 treasures sealed in this Forbidden Mountain. Because the system's ability to break the restrictions had been removed, it was no doubt that Yi Xian had taken advantage of this Forbidden Mountain. Others had worked hard and even been trapped for hundreds of thousands of years and still couldn't advance much. However, it was only a matter of minutes for Yi Xian. The Forbidden Mountain, which had trapped countless strong people, seemed so fragile in front of Yi Xian. Because the system's ability to break restrictions had been restored. Everyone else only wanted to reach the peak of the mountain. All they wanted to do was to open a path of restriction and reach the peak. However, when Yi Xian arrived, he continued to walk around the restriction mountain. Because what he wanted to do was to take all the treasures in the entire Forbidden Mountain. Ebony root, magnificent lotus vine, frozen bloodgrass? They're not useful. I'll just devour them. Yi Xian waved his hand again and opened 3 restrictions. He took the treasures in them, but when he found that they were not useful, he chose to devour them. Actually, up until now, Yi Xian had finally discovered something unusual. Until now, he had encountered a total of 320,000 restrictions, and all of them had been undone by him and taken away. However, among these 320,000 restrictions, about 20,000 of them had obviously been opened before. The treasures inside were also of a much lower quality. In fact, one of the 3 restrictions that Yi Xian had unlocked this time was still recovering. In other words, someone had only just unlocked this restriction 1,000 years ago. Interesting. It's getting more and more interesting. Could it be that I'll meet other people here? Yi Xian put away the items and continued to sweep the treasures. He was like a bandit. Wherever he went, the restrictions would be completely broken. The treasures inside were all taken away by him without exception. Ding! The host has leveled up. The host's current level is a 3rd-grade medium true god. Among the treasures that Yi Xian obtained, some were good and some were bad according to the difficulty of the restrictions. The good ones were naturally taken away. As for the ones that Yi Xian did not care about, he devoured them directly. Who would have thought that his level would increase unknowingly? Yi Xian was in a good mood. It had only been 10 days since he entered the Forbidden Mountain. In addition to obtaining countless treasures, he had also increased his level. This was such a good thing that Yi Xian would not reject it. Let's continue. Yi Xian was about to advance. All of a sudden, a powerful pressure crushed down on him. Not good. It's the pressure from a god. Yi Xian was shocked. God realm. Why? Why was there a god too of a god in this Forbidden Mountain? Was this a joke to be a joke? Yi Xian wasn't a match for the heavenly god realm at all. Following the arrival of the pressure, in the blink of an eye, 2 figures arrived in front of Yi Xian. There was more than one god in the Forbidden Mountain. Damn! Were they not giving Yi Xian a chance to live? Yi Xian looked at the 2 people in front of him nervously. He did not even have the chance to escape now. Once these 2 people had bad intentions, Yi Xian would be done for. Are you sure it's this kid? Yes, it's him. I'm 100% sure. He's just a mid-level deity? Is that possible? It's him. I've been secretly observing him for 3 whole days. There's no mistake. The 2 gods did not seem to care about Yi Xian at all. Instead, they were talking to each other. Yi Xian did not dare to say anything. However, he could not help but wonder what the 2 of them were talking about. Kid, were you the one who broke those restrictions? Suddenly, one of them finally spoke to Yi Xian. Restrictions. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. He quickly calculated in his mind. The rules of this Forbidden Mountain were very simple and crude. Break the restrictions and you could leave alive. You could even receive rewards that you did not expect. Otherwise, you would be trapped here forever. Could it be that these 2 people actually had a favor to ask of him? It was very possible. Perhaps, this was his only chance. Yi Xian did not hesitate and answered directly. Yes, I was the one who broke the restrictions in front. What do you mean by that? Yi Xian's affirmative answer made the 2 of them look at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. You're the only one who relied on the black all? How could you break the restrictions so quickly? Could it be that you're a restriction master? So you've already thought of a name for yourself. Yi Xian snickered in his heart. From their answers, Yi Xian already knew their purpose. To put it bluntly, these guys were just poor people trapped in this Forbidden Mountain. At the very least, Yi Xian was absolutely safe within the Restriction Mountain. This was because if these people wanted to live, if they wanted to leave the Restriction Mountain, they could only do so through this place. Therefore, Yi Xian, who had the powerful ability to break restrictions, was undoubtedly their life-saving straw. At least in this place, they definitely did not dare to have the slightest malicious intent towards Yi Xian. At the thought of this, Yi Xian exhaled in his heart. Divine realm? So what? Yi Xian was the real king here. These guys, no matter what cultivation they had, all needed Yi Xian's help. Haha, I'm not a restriction master, but I know a little. I just heard that there's a forbidden mountain here, so I came to have a try. Yi Xian replied indifferently. Although his tone denied that he was not a restriction master, it clearly showed his disdain for this forbidden mountain. The two celestial god realm powerhouses were overjoyed at that moment. Haha, haha, we finally waited for a real restriction master. Damn it, that bullsh** T Master KU has been trapped in this restriction for a full 18,000 years. If this continues, I'm afraid few of us can leave here. Master, let's have another stormy night. This is Du Haiju. Please take us out of here. The two of them didn't hesitate in the slightest as they spoke to Yi Xian in a respectful tone. Yi Xian smiled slightly and pretended to be profound as he waved his hand. Well said, well said. Anyway, I'm going to leave here, so let's go together. From your tone, it seems that there are more than two of you? Could it be that there are other people trapped here? Yi Xian's tone was indifferent. But he was already overjoyed. Two divine realm experts had to be obedient in front of him. Chapter 2106. To tell you the truth, the 32 of us entered the ancient god trial test 20,000 years ago. It is a pity that the first test has trapped us for 20,000 years. Although there is no danger in the restriction mountain, if we are unable to break the restriction, we will not be able to move an inch. Furthermore, with the passage of time, our divine power is also diminishing. There were actually hundreds of people who entered together, but now, only 32 of us are left. The others have long used up their divine power and their godheads have been shattered. F***ck, Yi Xian was slightly shocked. These guys actually came in 20,000 years ago. F***ck, how old was Yi Xian now? 20,000 years was a terrifying number that Yi Xian didn't even dare to think about. In Yi Xian's heart, these guys were probably very lonely. Of course, Yi Xian wouldn't say this out loud. Instead, he maintained his calm and indifferent attitude, completely unmoved. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't reply, Du Haiju immediately said, Master, this way please. Perhaps you don't know this, but you don't need to break all the restrictions in this restriction mountain. You just need to go all the way to the top, and there will be a way out at the top. Nonsense. How could Yi Xian not know this? Yi Xian knew this clearly. However, there were treasures in every restriction, which was why Yi Xian had to break the restrictions one by one. Of course, he was facing two divine realm experts, so he naturally didn't dare to be too presumptuous. He could only nod and follow their directions. After walking for only 2 hours, Yi Xian saw a large group of people in the distance. This strange restriction mountain was only 2 hours away, but Yi Xian's divine consciousness couldn't sense anyone here. Haha, everyone come over quickly. Look who I've brought back. Let me tell you, this is a real restriction master. Du Haiju greeted the group from afar. Divine realm. Divine realm. What the F***ck? They were all in the divine realm. Low-level heavenly god, mid-level heavenly god, high-level heavenly god. Among these 32 people, the weakest one was actually a low-level 9th grade celestial god. Damn you! Yi Xian felt a chill in his heart. This group of terrifying fellows, I'm afraid any one of them would be able to crush Yi Xian to death like an ant with just one hand. 32 heavenly deity stage powerhouses. What terrifying strength! Du Haiju, you said this kid is a restriction master? Him. A mere mid-true god brat? Suddenly, an old man in a long robe walked towards Yi Xian. It seemed that everyone here was very afraid of him. However, his strength was merely at the middle true god realm. Seeing this situation, Yi Xian did not need to ask to know that this guy was the so-called Master Moonless. Sure enough, before Yi Xian could say anything, Du Haiju immediately said, Master Moonless, haha, we saw with our own eyes that Master Yi swept away the restriction below. We won't doubt this. Although Du Haiju's tone did not seem to be abnormal, the disdain in his eyes had already proved that he did not trust Master Moonless. Of course, if it was anyone else who was trapped in a restriction for 18,000 years, they would probably have such thoughts. Haha, alright, since you said this kid is a restriction master, I won't argue with you. Kid, come on, try this restriction. What Master Moonless was referring to was the restriction that had trapped him for a full 18,000 years. Yi Xian did not bother to say more. His cultivation level was too low. It could be said that if he did not have the ability to break the restriction, in the eyes of these people, they would not even take a look at him. Therefore, Yi Xian needed to break the restriction to prove his worth. Only in this way could he be protected by these people, or in other words, he would not be easily killed by these people. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't say a word and walked towards the restriction, everyone immediately shut their mouths. Even Master K, you didn't mock him anymore. After all, breaking the restriction was their only chance of survival. No one would cause trouble at this time because no one would joke about their own lives. However, although Yi Xian came to the restriction, he did not immediately ask the system to do anything. Instead, he sat there cross-legged and began to organize his gains. This was because Yi Xian was very clear that this restriction had trapped these people for 18,000 years. If he immediately tried to break it, he was afraid that it would cause unnecessary trouble. He sat there for an entire month. During this month, Yi Xian did not even move an inch. The others seemed to be the same. No one moved an inch. It was as if time had stopped. Sigh. Suddenly, Yi Xian sighed. In an instant, the expressions of these people changed greatly. Could it be that Yi Xian was completely powerless? Haha, little brat. This restriction is something that even I can't break. How dare an arrogant brat like you talk nonsense? Master Moonless looked disdainful and did not show any mercy in his words. Du Haju also immediately walked towards Yi Xian. Master, this restriction, don't you have a way to break it? Yes, if Yi Xian did not have a way, then did they have to wait 18,000 years for a person to come here? Yi Xian's lips curled slightly, but it quickly disappeared and was replaced by a helpless expression. I can break this restriction, but unfortunately, I need some materials, and I don't have enough rare treasures. This was a rip-off. Yi Xian was a prickly extortion. I see. Come, Master, take these interspatial rings first. Feel free to use the things inside. If they are not enough, feel free to use all the resources we have here. Suddenly, an upper-level heavenly god came directly in front of Yi Xian and took out 5 interspatial rings. Yi Xian casually took them and used his divine consciousness to check them. He was ecstatic. Heavens! There were so many treasures. It was more than enough for him to break through to the upper-level heavenly god level. Moreover, there were even more resources for him. This was great. This was so great that he could not ask for more. Of course, Yi Xian could not show the slightest joy on his face. He took the 5 interspatial rings and began to fiddle with them pretentiously. Unfortunately, no one understood what he was trying to do. Of course, even Yi Xian himself was just messing around. If he wanted to break the restriction, he would need the system. System, come on, break this restriction in front of me. Chapter 2107. Ding! System notification. This is a heaven-level restriction. If you want to break it, you will need to use some special resources. Please use the resources. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. What a scam. He actually needed resources to break it. What AF * King Jinx? Of course, Yi Xian could not say no. System, it's okay. You can use any of the resources in the Qian Kuan ring. Ding. Resource collection complete. Host, please take note. The restriction is about to be broken. Along with these words, all sorts of divine stones, spirit wood, and divine beast materials flew into the air from Yi Xian's hands before quickly condensing. This process lasted for 6 hours. Finally, the countless materials condensed into something that looked like a droplet of water. When the droplet of water fell, the restriction in front of them instantly melted into nothingness. Of course, this was the result of Yi Xian deliberately slowing down his speed. This. Master Moonless' face was as red as a pig's liver. A moment ago, he was still doubting whether Yi Xian could break the restriction. But now, not only did Yi Xian break the restriction, but he also used a method that he had never seen before. A month's time? For these old fellows who had been trapped here for tens of thousands of years, it was just a blink of an eye. How terrifying. At this moment, everyone looked at Yi Xian with gazes filled with worship. Give all your Qian Kuan rings to Master Yi. Suddenly, a person roared loudly. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that the person who spoke was actually Master Moonless. No one wanted to die. Everyone wanted to leave this god-forsaken place. Now, the opportunity was right in front of them. How could they not be excited? Okay, I'll give it to you. As long as Master Yi can take me away, I'll follow Master Yi for the rest of my life without any regrets, let alone Qian Kuan rings. Everyone chimed in and took out all their extra Qian Kuan rings. Yi Xian was overjoyed. Awesome. So awesome. These were the Qian Kuan rings of heavenly gods. There were so many good things in them that one couldn't ask for more. However, Yi Xian was disappointed when he received them. This time, he was given a total of 53 Qian Kuan rings. However, the items in these 53 Qian Kuan rings were less than the heavenly treasures in the previous 5 Qian Kuan rings. It turned out that in order to maintain their divine power, most of the resources they had used up. Furthermore, they had to keep a part of it, so they could not really give them everything they had. If it wasn't for Yi Xian's ability to break through restrictions, they probably wouldn't have been willing to give him these resources. Of course, even so, Yi Xian still made a huge profit. There were many treasures in these Qian Kuan rings. Especially those things that couldn't be refined into divine power. They might not be of much use to others, but to Yi Xian, they were extremely useful. He did not even dare to devour them. Why? The reason was simple. Yi Xian was only an intermediate divine realm expert. These divine realm experts would not care about Yi Xian at all. However, if Yi Xian's strength increased, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yi Xian was very clear that even if not everyone was staring at the spatial rings in his hands, there would definitely be people who would have designs on them. Of course, there was no need to consider this now. As long as he was still in Restriction Mountain, these people would not dare to do anything to him. However, perhaps to these people, 1,000 years of waiting was acceptable. However, for Yi Xian, even a month of waiting was incomparably unbearable. Should he break the restriction quickly and leave this place? Would he have to face these experts? Or should he take it slow and think of a way to eliminate as much danger as possible in Restriction Mountain? 2 choices. But they were not difficult. Yi Xian turned around and looked at these divine realm experts. It seemed that before leaving, Yi Xian had to eliminate all uncertainties. Kill them? It did not seem possible. Therefore, the best way was to control these people unknowingly. Soul control. A simple and violent method. But it would definitely be effective. It did not need to be permanent, nor could it be permanent. But even a short period of control was enough. After leaving Restriction Mountain, Yi Xian had already flown far away. As for these people, Yi Xian also believed that after the soul control was removed, their first thought would be to leave this place and not find trouble with Yi Xian. Damn. The gap between their realms was too big. How could he kill these people? Yi Xian had no idea at all. But how could he achieve Yi Xian's goal? He looked at the group of divine realm experts. This was a big challenge. This was definitely a super big challenge. Yi Xian silently walked to the next restriction and sat down. No one disturbed him. They all thought that he was thinking of a way to break the restriction. But in fact, Yi Xian was sorting out the things he had obtained, trying to find a way to break the current predicament. Heart of Eternal Frost? Trash. Water Moon Crystal Core? Trash. The essence of the immortal divine wood? This is not bad. I can use it. Yi Xian had a bountiful harvest this time. Not to mention other things. Just the universal currency of the divine realm, the divine crystal, had reached 1,000,000 pieces. Of course it was probably more than that, but this thing could be used to directly extract divine power, so it was almost depleted. The system was damaged. There were many things that Yi Xian did not even know what they were. The only thing he could confirm was that these things were good stuff. Ding. System notice. Detected special material that can be used to strengthen the war god bloodline. Does the host wish to strengthen it? There is actually something that can strengthen the bloodline? This must be strengthened. I will strengthen it now. Ding. The resource has been successfully used. Host, please note that the system is currently damaged. There is a 60% chance of failure. At the same time, each successful strengthening requires 7 days of waiting time. Ding! Strengthening failed. Extracting resource, strengthening failed. Ding! Extracting resource, strengthening successful. Ding! The host's war god bloodline has been successfully strengthened. It did not upgrade? Damn it, the system malfunction caused Yi Xian to suffer heavy losses. He only succeeded once out of 3 strengthening attempts. However, Yi Xian had no choice but to continue strengthening. Only by continuously strengthening his own strength without increasing his cultivation base would he have a greater chance of winning against the sky gods. Ding. Detected special material that can be used to strengthen the host's divine sense. Does the host wish to strengthen it? Strengthen, why not strengthen it? Humph. So what if the losses are greater? If we can't leave this place, then everything will be for naught. In any case, these resources were easily obtained. Yi Xian did not need to be too stingy. Of course, it would be even better if he had the materials to repair the system. Unfortunately, this was just a thought. Chapter 2108. Another month passed. Yi Xian sat in the same spot and did not do anything else. Of course, no one would disturb him. Not to mention a month, even if Yi Xian broke through a restriction in 10 years, these people would still be able to accept it. Of course, Yi Xian himself could not wait that long. In this month, Yi Xian spent countless resources and experienced failure again and again to strengthen his bloodline and divine consciousness. Although Yi Xian's realm did not seem to have increased, his combat power had increased tremendously. After all, bloodline was equivalent to physique. As for divine consciousness, it had even more uses. Strengthening these two would undoubtedly strengthen Yi Xian's case. Of course, for Yi Xian, the most important thing was still that move. From these Qian Kuan rings, Yi Xian obtained a large amount of resources and some cultivation techniques. These cultivation techniques were probably left behind by the original owner of the rings. It was very messy, from the most basic use of divine power to some basic supernatural powers and even secret techniques. After all, these people were all heavenly gods. How could they not have some of these techniques? Other heavenly gods might not have been interested in them, so when they were given to Yi Xian, they included these cultivation techniques. However, for Yi Xian, this was undoubtedly an opportunity. System. Do these cultivation techniques have any reference value? Why did Yi Xian ask this question? As it turned out, Yi Xian had planned to use soul control and other methods to eliminate the danger. Naturally, he thought of the system. At first, Yi Xian did not have high hopes, but who would have thought that? The system would actually give Yi Xian a surprise. The devouring skill. Yes, Yi Xian had never encountered a devouring skill before, although his Eye of Revelation could learn other people's special supernatural powers and cultivation techniques. However, this was the first time Yi Xian had heard of a devouring skill. According to the system's description, the devouring skill was similar to devouring various treasures and leveling up. To put it simply, Yi Xian could devour a large number of skills and turn them into experience for a single skill. Of course, these experience points were not used to level up skills, but to fuse skills. According to the system, as long as the quality of the skill met the system's requirements, then 2 or more skills could be combined together to form a new skill. When he was in the mortal world, he had obtained a similar system function, but compared to this, it was not quite the same. Yi Xian trembled with excitement at the thought of this function, even though he had yet to obtain a single system fusion skill. However, just by listening to the description, it was still an extremely awesome thing. He even had a feeling. That was, the system failure this time wasn't a disaster for Yi Xian. Instead, it was a good thing. That was because, in name, it was a system failure, but in reality, it was a system recasting. Furthermore, it was not as simple as Yi Xian had initially thought. This recasting would definitely give Yi Xian more functions and benefits. Ding. Host, please specify the type of skill you require. The system will automatically group them into groups. Type. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Unfortunately, there were many cultivation techniques here, and naturally there were many types. Attack type, defense type, even summoning type, beast taming type, and so on. However, although these were good, they weren't what Yi Xian needed the most. System, I want a control type skill. Yi Xian said directly. Yes, this was what he needed the most now. Ding. System analysis successful. Host, 2 skills, 1 ability. Ding. 1. Demo Yi technique. Able to forcibly control any target within 3 people of a lower level than yourself. Ding. 2. Heavenly puppet technique. Special ability. Successful mastery will permanently grant you the right to summon God servants to help you in battle. Ding. 3. Living fetus technique. Special ability of the demon god. Able to cultivate servants, starting from the fetus. Holy *T. Yi Xian looked at the 3 skills and abilities that the system had given him. One was control type, one was summon type, and one was actually nurturing. Not bad, these heavenly gods have quite a lot of stock. However, to Yi Xian, these 3 skills were just as-oh. That was because Yi Xian wanted to fuse them. Alright system, I will cultivate these 3 skills and abilities. Ding! Host, please note that cultivating these skills and abilities will take 3 days. Yi Xian nodded. 3 days was not much at all. 3 days later, the system notification sounded again. After devouring countless other cultivation methods and divine abilities, the 3rd step cultivation methods and divine abilities had all been upgraded to divine grade cultivation methods. And God tier was the basic requirement to devour and fuse them. However, Yi Xian was not in a hurry to fuse them. Instead, he let the system continue to devour them. System, devour the rest of the skills. Anyway, there is no use in keeping them. Distribute the experience equally. I want to fuse a useful skill or ability. Ding! The host has chosen to continue devouring. This time, it will take 5 days. Yi Xian nodded and waited silently. 5 days later. Finally, it was time to witness a miracle. A miracle created by the system. A new skill was about to be born. System, are you ready? Come, fuse a new skill. Yi Xian said to the system excitedly. Of course, the system was always ready. Ding. Start fusion. Ding. Skill fusion. Ding. Congratulations to the host. You have obtained a new ability, Spiritual Consciousness Devouring. Spiritual Consciousness Devouring? This name sounded a little cool. Yi Xian quickly looked at the description of Spiritual Consciousness Devouring. After all, this was the first skill he had obtained through devouring and fusion. It would be a lie to say that he was not excited. Spiritual Consciousness Devouring. A unique ability that the host obtained through self-fusion. As long as one has enough divine sense, one can use it. At the same time, it has 2 major special abilities. Ability 1. The host can activate Spiritual Consciousness Devouring to forcibly devour any target's spiritual consciousness and turn it into one's own puppet. During this process, the host can choose to devour permanently or temporarily. Permanent devouring requires devouring points. At the same time, the higher the target's realm, the more devouring points required. Ability 2. System Conversion. This ability determines the success rate of Spiritual Consciousness Devouring based on the strength of the host's divine sense. However, if the host does not have enough divine sense, the system can use various treasures and resources to strengthen the divine sense and increase the success rate of Spiritual Consciousness Devouring. Damn. Chapter 2109. No matter who the target was, as long as he had enough resources, he could convert the target's spiritual consciousness into divine consciousness and then forcibly devour it. What was spiritual consciousness? To put it bluntly, it was his subjective consciousness. After devouring it, the target would become his puppet. However, he needed to consume devouring points to be able to devour it permanently. This made Yi Xian a little unhappy. Of course, if he could really use such an awesome skill however he wanted, it would be a little too much. It was reasonable that the system would impose restrictions. Besides, Yi Xian had a feeling that this temporary devouring of spiritual consciousness would not last long. Of course, this was a good thing that Yi Xian could use to get out of this predicament. Yi Xian could not be unhappy. He glanced at the divine realm experts around him. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Just you wait, these guys. It would be fine if they did not cause trouble for Yi Xian after breaking the restrictions. However, if they dared to cause trouble for him, he would definitely let them know what it felt like to be stabbed in the back by one's own comrade. Yi Xian resisted the urge to test the spiritual sense devouring ability right now. He silently stood up and began to break through the restrictions. This time, he wouldn't be so hesitant. What he wanted was to break the restrictions quickly and leave this place as soon as possible. Yi Xian casually waved his hand. Several rays of light rose and rushed toward the restrictions around him at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the restrictions were broken and the treasures inside flew directly into Yi Xian's hands. However, Yi Xian wouldn't stop just because he was so far away. After breaking the restrictions in front of him, Yi Xian continued to move forward. He did not care about the dumbfounded divine realm experts behind him and began to harvest frantically. He harvested the treasures here and at the same time, he harvested the restrictions here. How is this possible? Master Moonless' mouth was wide open in astonishment, as if he had seen a ghost. Was Yi Xian really breaking the restrictions now? When others tried to break a restriction, they would study it carefully and make some preparations before they dared to do it. Even so, there was no guarantee that they would be able to break the restriction. However, what was the situation with this little guy in front of him? With a wave of his hand, several or even dozens of restrictions were broken at the same time. Moreover, batch after batch, there was no sign of stopping at all. Are you sure you're breaking the restrictions? Breaking the restrictions of Restriction Mountain? Break the super restriction that had trapped countless experts to death? Master Moonless was not the only one who was dumbfounded. At this time, the 32 celestial gods trapped here had all stood up. Every single one of their faces was filled with astonishment. Such a method of breaking restrictions had already exceeded the limits of their imagination. 100% success rate. That reaping speed had long since exceeded the limits of their imaginations. Master Yi. Master Yi. Someone whispered softly. In fact, he could not find the right words to describe his current mood, nor could he find the right words to describe Yi Xian's actions. However, in the short time they were in a daze, Yi Xian had already harvested thousands of restrictions. Yi Xian could not be bothered to look at the items in the restrictions. Regardless of whether they were good or bad, he would take them first. After all, even if it was something that Yi Xian couldn't use, he could still use the method of padding to exchange for something that was useful to Yi Xian. Quick! Follow Master Yi. Finally, someone reacted and hurriedly caught up with Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not pay attention to these people. He only cared about harvesting the restrictions in front of him quickly. Of course, this time, Yi Xian would not obediently walk up the mountain. Instead, he spiraled around Restriction Mountain and harvested the items along the way. After all, even if 1% of these items were useful to Yi Xian, it was still a huge profit. 17 days. It had only been 17 days. Yi Xian and the others had already reached the last restriction. Opening this place was their chance to get out. Opening this place meant that they could leave Restriction Mountain. Perhaps Yi Xian was still all right. After all, he had not been trapped here for long. If he wanted to, he could leave at any time. However, the others were already extremely excited at this time. 20,000 years? Especially in such a desolate place. For these divine gods, it was really a very long time. After enduring for so long, they were about to get out. It would be a lie to say that they were not excited. However, at this moment, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks and did not move forward. Master Yi, why don't you continue to break the restrictions? In the past 17 days, they had followed behind Yi Xian. They had never seen Yi Xian hesitate. Along the way, they had been like a hot knife through butter. There was no restriction that could stop Yi Xian. Unknowingly, in these people's hearts, Yi Xian had become an invincible existence. In their hearts, there was no restriction that Yi Xian could not break. Therefore, when they saw Yi Xian suddenly stop in his tracks, it was inevitable that they would find it strange. Oh, I've used up all my resources. Sigh, I didn't expect that I would not have the resources to break the last restriction. Yi Xian laughed inwardly. What resources? Breaking this restriction was just a matter of words for Yi Xian. This was because the system did not have any difficulty in breaking these restrictions. The resources required were also very few. However, why did Yi Xian break the restrictions so easily? Why did he have so many fat sheep behind him? If he did not take advantage of them, would he be able to face Yi Xian by staying here for so long? Yes, he was taking advantage of them. However, these divine gods were very willing to accept Yi Xian's advantage. They even rushed to hand their interspatial rings to Yi Xian. Haha, so you need treasures. I have them. Feel free to use them, Master Yi. Grandmaster Yi, come and use my treasure. I was wondering why Grandmaster Yi was able to break through so many restrictions in one go. Now it seems that Grandmaster Yi must have used up all his resources. That's right. Master Yi, how should I put it? We're all leaving this place together. You're the one who worked hard, and we can't help at all. If we need Master Ye's resources and treasures, then we're in the wrong. Master Yi, take my interspatial ring. All the treasures are useless if you lose your life. Use mine. Grandmaster Yi, use mine. Chapter 21:10. Was this the rhythm of competing to give treasures to Yi Xian? Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. This time, he wasn't being greedy. Didn't he see the actions of these people? It was obvious that if Yi Xian didn't use their treasures, they would be angry with Yi Xian. In that case, Yi Xian could only reluctantly accept all of them. Of course, Yi Xian's heart was already bursting with joy at this moment. When he saw that these people were indeed not going to get anything out of them, Yi Xian turned around and walked towards the last seal. System, come on. It's time to leave this place. Open the last seal and let's leave. Ding. Host, please take note. This seal is at the level of a Lord God. It is currently unable to be removed. What? Yi Xian was so shocked that he almost jumped up. It can't be. It can't be removed. System, please don't scare me. Is this what they mean by extreme joy begets sorrow? System, is there really no other way? Yi Xian asked the system in his heart, slightly agitated. Ding. Host, please take note. There are currently 2 ways to remove this seal. They have a 30% success rate and a 90% success rate respectively. Ding. The first way is to forcefully strip the host's divine power and forcefully remove the seal. The success rate is 30%. The price is that the host will be permanently demoted to lower rank 1 true god. Ding. The second way is to use a large amount of resources to slowly remove the seal. The success rate is 90%. Extreme joy begets sorrow. Indeed, extreme joy begets sorrow. Yi Xian stood rooted to the ground. It took him a long time to react. Sigh, this is not giving me a choice at all. It could be said that even if Yi Xian was demoted to lower rank 1 true god, with enough resources, he could still quickly level up. However, that 30% success rate made it impossible for Yi Xian to choose. In fact, there was only one choice given by the system. That was to use resources to exchange for the last seal. Since it was a separate notification, Yi Xian could already predict that he would have to pay a huge price this time. The only consolation was that these resources were easily obtained by Yi Xian in the first place. So, even if they were to use them up, they would not feel too bad. Alright, system. Use plan 2. What resources do you need? Just draw them. Yi Xian said helplessly. Following Yi Xian's words, his entire body suddenly erupted with a rainbow-colored light. These rays of light were actually the purest form of divine power. Within Yi Xian's engulfing space, countless treasures within the interspatial ring were also converted into divine power by the system. The pure divine power all wrapped around the final restriction. Soon, the entire restriction was enveloped by the rainbow-colored photon computer. What a pure divine power. It seems that Grandmaster Yi has taken out everything he has this time. That's right. So much pure divine power. I wonder how many heavenly treasures it would take to refine it. It's a pity that I don't have any good treasures on hand. Otherwise, I would definitely give them to Grandmaster Yi. This time, Grandmaster Yi has paid a huge price. I've heard that restriction masters usually have a large reserve of resources. This is because whether it is setting up restrictions or breaking restrictions, a large amount of resources are required. At first, I thought that this was a lie. But now, it seems that it's not a lie at all. Everyone was discussing animatedly. This was a blessing in disguise. Yi Xian had lost almost all of his gains this time. However, his actions had earned him the goodwill of these people. This was what it meant to be a blessing in disguise. It could be said that before this, there might have been some people who wanted to rob Yi Xian after leaving. But now, there was probably no one. First of all, Yi Xian's resources had all been used up. This was something that everyone could see. Therefore, even if they robbed Yi Xian, they would not gain much. Secondly, this time, Yi Xian could be considered the savior of their 32 people. If they made a move, they would have to risk offending others. In that case, under the current circumstances, it would be unwise to make a move on Yi Xian. 32 heavenly gods? Moreover, they represented different forces. It could be said that this time, although Yi Xian had lost his resources, he had gained the friendship of these people in exchange. No matter what, it was not a loss. Finally, after a bow sound, the sound was heard. The final restriction was undone. However, the moment it was opened, a ray of white light streaked across the sky and landed directly on Yi Xian's body. It completely surrounded Yi Xian. Ding! A large amount of pure divine power is detected. It is recommended that the host consume it immediately. Ding! The host has made a breakthrough. The host is currently a 4th grade medium deity. Ding! The host has made a breakthrough. The host is currently a 5th grade medium deity. The beam of light had only appeared for 3 seconds. This was because this beam of light was actually just to give Yi Xian the so-called supernatural power reward. However, Yi Xian had unexpectedly gained 2 levels of improvement. This was because the beam of light was actually pure divine power. Sigh, what a pity. If only it could come for a few more seconds, then I would have been able to level up a few more times. Almost all the resources obtained from the restriction mountain had been used up by this last restriction. Now that this pure divine power had appeared, if Yi Xian did not consume it, he would really gain nothing. 2 levels? Forget it, 2 levels it is. It's better than nothing, isn't it? Yi Xian was helpless. After all, the inheritance that he had obtained was really useless to Yi Xian. This inheritance was actually an absolute defense restriction. It was fine if it was for his own use, but the key was that this restriction could only be set up in a fixed location and then used to protect something in that area. Therefore, it was not very useful to Yi Xian. At least, it was not very useful for now. I'm finally out. 20,000 years. A whole 20,000 years. I don't want to come back to this D*MN place ever again in this lifetime. The moment they came out, the 32 heavenly gods were so excited that they started shouting and yelling. It was obvious that they were really very excited. Of course, if it were Yi Xian, not to mention being trapped for 20,000 years, even if he was trapped for 20 years, he would not be any different from them. A moment later, Du Haju was the first to react and directly walked to Yi Xian's side. Master Yi, it's all thanks to your help that we were able to successfully escape this time. Right now, I really don't have anything good that I can take out. However, take this jade pendant. This is the token of my holy water sect. As long as you bring this to me, I, Du Haju, will definitely help you with all my strength no matter what. Chapter 21:11. Master Moonless? Who would have thought that the only restriction master among the 32 would be from Lingxian court? After that, the rest of the people also revealed their identities and left behind their tokens for Yi Xian before leaving in a hurry. Yi Xian could empathize with Xing Qian. After so many years, they still did not know what had happened in the outside world. 20,000 years might not be considered an eternity in the realm of the gods, but it was definitely not a short period of time. After all, they were only sky celestials. 20,000 years was indeed a very long time for them. He waited until everyone had left. Yi Xian began to think about his own matters. At this moment, he had already passed the first test. However, Yi Xian did not know what the second test would entail. Of course, at the same time that he passed the first test, Yi Xian also passed the Tongtian Gorge. Now, Yi Xian could choose to continue or leave. However, the system repair mission required Yi Xian to explore the entire Valley of Despair. If the Valley of Despair had been an ordinary place, it would have been fine. However, the key was that the Valley of Despair had been left behind by an overgod. Just the first test had taken up so much of Yi Xian's time. What about the second and third tests? In fact, Yi Xian didn't even know how many more obstacles were waiting for him in front of him. After hesitating for a while, Yi Xian finally decided to continue. At least, Yi Xian had not encountered any danger yet. Perhaps he could give the Valley of Despair a try. Onward. However, Yi Xian did not discover anything special until he arrived at a small town. Yes, there were people in the Valley of Despair. There was a town. Yi Xian took a step forward and prepared to enter the town. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Trial taker. Congratulations on entering the second test. Haha, it's not easy. It's been 30,000 years. You are the first one to reach my second test in 30,000 years. My second test is very simple. Look at the town in front of us. I can tell you that all the people in that town failed the second test and were sealed by me for eternity. And your second test is to slay the ancient demon dragon. According to the rules, those below the sky celestial realm are not qualified to participate in the test. However, since you passed the first test and proved your strength, I will give you a special privilege. You can go to the town and choose 4 followers to carry out the mission with you. Don't worry, they will definitely obediently hand over their quintessence and submit to you." After saying that, the phantom disappeared. F***CK. Why are they the same? Can't they say more? Yi Xian was depressed. The guardian of the first stage had at least introduced himself and even said that he would receive a reward. The second stage, on the other hand, didn't say anything superfluous. It just suddenly appeared and then disappeared. Looking at the town in front of him, Yi Xian knew that he had to carry out the test. This was because there was a restriction placed behind him. This restriction was much stronger than the last restriction in the first test. Yi Xian walked step by step towards the town. However, he found that before he arrived, the people in the town were already looking at him differently. What was going on? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Sky Celestial Realm. Sky Celestial Realm. All of them were Sky Celestial Realm experts. In this strange valley of despair, all of the people that Yi Xian had seen so far were Sky Celestial Realm experts. Could it be that there was a secret behind all of this? Yi Xian frowned slightly, but he still walked forward. Medium Celestial Realm? This is strange. Kid, where did you come from? Why did you enter the Ancient Divine Venerables test when you are only a Medium Celestial Realm expert? Just as Yi Xian entered the town, someone immediately asked him. The person who asked was a young man. He looked like he was only a few years older than Yi Xian. Of course, Yi Xian knew that these people were all old antiques. After all, the guardian of the second trial said that Yi Xian was the first person to reach the second trial in the past 30,000 years. In other words, the people here had been trapped for at least 30,000 years. Yi Xian did not reply, but he heard someone beside him speak first. Who cares? Since he's able to enter this place, that proves that he's a trial challenger. Moreover, he's someone who passed the first trial. All of us failed the first trial, so we can only form a team for the second trial. Now that someone has finally arrived, why do we care so much? After that person finished speaking, he immediately asked Yi Xian. Hey, kid, you are here to find a teammate, right? How about counting me in? Hu Lao-san, you are not being kind. 30,000 years ago, when 9 Blades came, you were the one who followed him. Don't you feel ashamed this time? Why can't I? Humph. There is no rule that says that everyone has to take turns to complete the mission. There is also no rule that says that each person can only complete the mission a few times. As long as I am willing, so what if I go every time? Shameless Hu Lao-san, your skin is getting thicker and thicker. Before Yi Xian could say anything, these people had already started arguing. Of course, Yi Xian would not say much. After all, there were hundreds of heavenly god experts in front of him. Suddenly, Yi Xian felt someone tugging at his clothes. Yi Xian turned his head and saw a young girl standing in front of him. Hee, you are here to find a teammate and complete your mission together, right? Don't worry about them. It is your right to choose who you want to be your teammate. I am 100 Blossoms. If you choose me as your teammate, I can even give you benefits that you would not be able to obtain. As she spoke, the young girl winked at Yi Xian. Her intentions could not be more obvious. Of course, Yi Xian did not pay her any attention. However, the current situation caused Yi Xian to be unable to understand. What was going on with these people? Also, what was going on with this small town? Alright, shut up, all of you. Suddenly, a voice full of energy rang out. Everyone turned their heads and saw an old man walking over. Mayor! Mayor! When they saw this old man, they all stepped aside. Mayor? The mayor of a group of heavenly god experts? Good lord, this was getting more and more interesting. Little guy, you are here to choose a teammate, right? According to the rules, everyone in the town can form a small team as long as you are willing to do so and complete your mission together. As for who you choose, it is your own decision. Alright, how many teammates can you choose? Chapter 21:12. Mayor, aren't you asking the obvious? Who doesn't know that the rule here is that each person can only choose one team? Someone seemed to want to say something, but before he could finish his sentence, he was stunned. This was because Yi Xian stretched out his hand and showed 4 fingers. I can choose 4 teammates. Boom! This sentence caused the entire town to erupt in excitement. 4. It was actually 4. One had to know that each of them were only allowed to bring one teammate with them. However, this kid actually had 4 teammates. However, when they remembered that Yi Xian was only a mid-level true god, they suddenly understood. After all, as far as they knew, to enter the supreme endless trials, one had to be at least a heavenly god. As for the true god realm, Yi Xian was the first one. Even though this town had stayed in this town for millions of years, it was the first time that they had seen a trial taker below the heavenly god realm. You're saying that you can bring 4 people with you on a mission? The mayor asked in astonishment. Yes, that's right. 4. Yi Xian replied affirmatively. 4, it's actually 4. Could it be that the guardian made a mistake this time? Everyone was discussing spiritedly. However, Yi Xian was thinking about his own matters. He asked, Mayor, why is it that everyone in this town has a heavenly god realm cultivation? Could it be that after being trapped for so many years, no one has been able to break through? Haha, breakthrough? Kid, you've just arrived, so it's normal that you don't know. This town is also called Eternal Town, right? He's referring to the people inside. Once the mission fails, those who are trapped here will forever be stuck with the cultivation level they had when they entered this place. This is because there's no divine power here. In this town, everyone is immortal. Unfortunately, if you don't complete the mission, you'll never be able to leave, and you won't be able to cultivate at all. Eternal Town? There was such an existence? For a moment, Yi Xian felt that the ancient god who had set up the supreme endless trials was even more difficult to understand. What kind of expert would be able to do such a thing? One had to know that even a god would die once his divine power was exhausted or his divine spark shattered. Now, there was a place where one could live forever. Of course, not being able to cultivate and not being able to leave was indeed a kind of torture. At this time, because Yi Xian could bring 4 people to carry out the mission, the townsfolk of the town all had excited looks on their faces. One had to know that they were trapped here because they had failed their mission. As for the second stage, everyone's mission was actually the same. They all had to kill a target. However, it was obvious which combination would have a higher success rate if 2 people went to kill a target and 5 people went to kill the target together. Take me with you. Let me carry out the mission with you. Choose me. Choose me. You definitely won't regret choosing me. For a moment, the crowd was clamoring. And louder. Yi Xian looked at these people and understood a little more about this town. The townsfolk didn't seem to be anything special, but in fact, everyone here was suppressed here. There was only one way to leave, and that was to wait for a person who had gone through the trial for the first time to team up with them and kill the target. Only then could they leave. At the same time, this town clearly prohibited fighting. Didn't you see how these people were arguing, but no one was making a move? Yi Xian finally understood why the guardian of the second stage had said that Yi Xian could choose any follower he wanted. Moreover, even if Yi Xian asked for the quintessence of the divine spark, no one would refuse. That was because there was only one way for the people here to leave. And Yi Xian was the first person to enter this place in the past 30,000 years. The quintessence of the divine spark was a fragment of the divine spark. As long as one's cultivation reached the god level, one would be able to cultivate their own divine spark. Not only did the divine spark have many uses, but it was also equivalent to a person's life essence. Handing over the quintessence of the divine spark was the same as handing over one's life. Yi Xian didn't hesitate. He said, My first requirement is that you hand over the quintessence of your divine spark. After the mission is completed, I will return your freedom. If you can do that, you can sign up now. What? This time, everyone fell silent. Handing over the divine spark fragment was the same as becoming a slave to this person in front of them. One shouldn't underestimate a single divine spark fragment. As long as Yi Xian had their divine spark fragment, he could kill them with a single thought. Handing over one's life to a stranger, especially one whose cultivation base was lower than theirs, was a condition that no one was willing to accept. However, the long wait had long since worn down these people's patience. Get out. Get out of this damned place. That was the only thought in many people's minds. Finally, someone stepped forward and said to Yi Xian, All right, I'm willing to hand over my divine spark fragment and follow you on your mission. A mid-level celestial god. It was actually a mid-level celestial god. Yi Xian was slightly surprised. Of course, he wouldn't show it in his current state. He casually took the divine spark fragment that the person handed over. He had found his first follower. There are still 3 spots left. Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. With this first person, Yi Xian believed that it would be much easier for him to recruit the rest. Sure enough, someone had already taken the first step. Finally, another person stepped forward. Furthermore, following that person, over a dozen other people also stood forth. Leave this place? There was always a price to pay. These people had been trapped here for far too long. For example, the first person to hand over his divine spark fragment had been trapped here for 300,000 years. A large group of celestial gods eagerly volunteered to be Yi Xian's followers. Yi Xian was so happy that the corners of his mouth were crooked. Once they got their hands on the divine spark fragment, it would be up to Yi Xian whether or not Yi Xian would let them leave. Soon, Yi Xian chose the other 3 people. Without exception, they were all mid-level celestial gods. These 3 people were the strongest among those who had signed up. Perhaps some of them would regret their decision, but whether they were chosen or not, there was no longer any chance for regrets. After Yi Xian finished choosing his followers, he and the other 4 suddenly disappeared from the small town. As it turned out, the guardian of the second trial had been keeping an eye on the small town all along. To be more precise, he had been keeping an eye on Yi Xian's every move. Chapter 21:13. Only now did they remember to ask Yi Xian what his mission was. In fact, although everyone's mission in the second stage was to kill a specific target, there was still a huge difference between them. Perhaps one of the reasons why these people were so eager to join Yi Xian's team was because Yi Xian's cultivation was too low. "All right, Brother Yi, what's your mission?" The one who spoke was called Li Lei, a very common name. At this moment, he was looking at Yi Xian with a slightly lost expression. It was obvious that he didn't have any confidence in his future. Yi Xian looked at Li Lei and did not hide anything. He answered directly, "My trial mission? It's to kill an ancient magic dragon." "What? What did you say?" "Ancient magic dragon." "It's actually an ancient magic dragon." Just as Yi Xian finished speaking, he saw the 4 people's shocked expressions, as if they had just heard something terrifying. "What's wrong with you guys? Are you scared?" Yi Xian curled his lips. Although he did not know what kind of existence the ancient magic dragon was, at least he dared to challenge it. As for those people who were scared to such an extent upon hearing the name of the ancient demon dragon, Yi Xian felt rather disdain in his heart. Li Lei looked at Yi Xian with an ugly expression. After a moment of daze, he said to Yi Xian, "Sigh, I didn't expect your mission to be an ancient magic dragon. This is an impossible mission. I really don't understand why the Guardian assigned this mission to you. No wonder you were asked to pick 4 people together. However, even if the 4 of us work together, we don't have the slightest chance of winning." "Is it that serious?" Yi Xian could see that Li Lei was telling the truth. In other words, in Li Lei's heart, the ancient magic dragon was an invincible existence. However, Yi Xian had never seen it before, so he could not understand how Li Lei and the others felt. "Sigh, it's more than just serious. To tell you the truth, there's only one ancient devil dragon. In the entire second trial, it can be considered the most powerful existence. Since you're here for the trial, you should know that only those below the heavenly god realm are allowed to enter. The ancient demon dragon is at the peak of the heavenly god realm. Although its cultivation level is suppressed due to the special environment here, it is still an ancient species. Not only is its physical body extremely tough, but it also possesses several powerful superpowers. It can be said that the few of us have no chance of winning." Li Lei finished speaking in one breath. Then, like the others, he sighed. It was as if he felt that if he didn't have a chance to defeat the ancient demon dragon and leave this place, he might even lose his life here. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. His brows furrowed tightly together. From Li Lei's words, Yi Xian could tell that this ancient demon dragon was not to be underestimated. However, Yi Xian did not feel that this was an unsolvable mission. In fact, Yi Xian felt that this was an opportunity. If Yi Xian could successfully kill the ancient demon dragon, which was at the peak of the heavenly god realm, the rewards would be unimaginable. If it was a level up, Yi Xian was almost certain that the ancient demon dragon alone would give him a chance to break through to the heavenly god realm. Of course, it was more likely that the system would receive a certain percentage of repairs. However, no matter what, whether it was a level up or a system repair, it would definitely be a great gain for Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian was determined to kill the ancient demon dragon. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the four of them. However, he was not worried at all. The divine persona fragments of the four of them were in Yi Xian's hands. No matter how unwilling they had no choice but to follow Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian did not even bother to say anything. Instead, he walked straight ahead. The location they had been teleported to was a forest. However, this was not an ordinary forest. It was a lava forest. There was only one type of strange tree that could grow here. Lava fire tree. The biggest characteristic of this type of tree was that it grew in lava. Of course, this type of tree was actually a pretty good material for refining weapons. However, Yi Xian was not interested in these lava fire trees at the moment. Yi Xian led the four of them through the lava fire tree forest cautiously. They carefully searched every possible corner in order to find the ancient demon dragon. The ancient demon dragon loved lava. Most of the time, they rested in the lava. Suddenly, a thunderous sound rang out. However, it was not the sound of thunder. It was the sneeze of some kind of creature. Over there. Without hesitation, Yi Xian rushed in the direction of the sound. Li Lei and the others had been following by Yi Xian's side the entire time. It was fine at first, but now they were all hesitating. Li Lei was the first to block Yi Xian's path. Well, I say, Brother Yi, why don't we give up? This ancient demon dragon is not something we can handle. If we go over now, it's no different from sending ourselves to our deaths. Yi Xian was stopped by Li Lei and had no choice but to stop. You guys, do you think so too? Yi Xian turned around and asked the other three. The three of them quickly replied, yes, this is the ancient demon dragon. How can we possibly be its match? If we go over now, we'll be sending ourselves to our deaths. Little friend Yi, why don't we just forget about it? Yi Xian looked at the four of them indifferently. He knew that if he did not use some special means, he would not be able to control these people at all. It seemed that Yi Xian was so nice to them that they thought he would be so easy to deal with. Right now, you only have two choices. Either you work together to help me kill the ancient demon dragon, then I will set you free. Or, you can choose to let me crush your shards of divine spark right now. Yi Xian's tone was very calm, as if he was casually saying that the weather was good today. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the four people's expressions changed drastically. If the shards of divine spark were crushed, they would definitely die. Yi Xian was actually using the shards of divine spark to threaten them. It was only now that they realized that they were not on par with Yi Xian at all. They had no right to bargain with Yi Xian. From the beginning, they had handed over their shards of divine spark casually. To put it nicely, they were Yi Xian's companions. To put it bluntly, they were Yi Xian's servants and slaves. What right did they have to make irresponsible remarks here? In an instant, the four people's expressions changed drastically. Then they fell silent. Chapter 21:14. All right. We got it. Li Lei's voice was cold. It was obvious that he was hostile towards Yi Xian. However, no matter what he thought, as long as Yi Xian had his shard of divinity, he would never be able to resist. Yi Xian nodded. If he didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't realize their current identities. All right, let's move on. I, Yi Xian, am a man of my word. As long as you help me kill the ancient mystic dragon, I'll return your freedom. Of course, you better pray that you don't die in battle. Also, let me remind you to give it your all. Don't think of slacking off. Since you know that the ancient mystic dragon isn't easy to deal with, you should also understand that if you don't give it your all, it's impossible to kill it. Hee, if I die, do you think you'll be able to survive? A threat. A blatant threat. However, when Li Lei and the others heard Yi Xian's words, they couldn't say a single word. How could they not understand what Yi Xian meant? At this moment, Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned all the withered bone sword servants in front of him. Although these things weren't very useful, they were still very useful for exploring the path and finding the ancient mystic dragon's location. Following Yi Xian's order, all the withered bone sword servants immediately rushed forward. Their mission was only to lure the ancient mystic dragon out. Boom! A loud sound rang out. At the same time, the system notification sounded. Ding! The withered bone sword servants have died. Would the host like to consume a skull heart to revive? Yi Xian didn't care about the notification. Instead, his expression suddenly changed. Over there. In an instant, Li Lei and the others rushed over. That was the direction where the withered bone sword servants had died. When Yi Xian saw the ancient mystic dragon's appearance, he finally understood why Li Lei and the others said that the ancient mystic dragon was undefeatable. The ancient mystic dragon was covered in dark red scales. Not only were the scales shining with a faint purplish-red light, but there were also bursts of flames from time to time. Mystic fire sacred gold. Yi Xian could not help but shout. The scales of the ancient demon dragon were actually mystical fire sacred gold. Was this really a living thing? One should know that the mystical fire sacred gold was a super material that was formed from the dark gold stone that grew at the bottom of volcanoes, the heart of a 10,000-year spirit tree, and the mysterious essence of the universe. It could be said that a defensive magical treasure refined with mystical fire sacred gold had at least twice the defensive strength of a defensive magical treasure of the same level. However, this ancient demon dragon was actually able to refine the rare mystic fire sacred gold into its scales. It was simply unimaginable. Of course, so what? Could it be that Yi Xian would be scared off? What are you waiting for? The four of you, attack together. Yi Xian ordered Li Lei and the others. At this time, Li Lei and the others were very clear that no matter how powerful this ancient devil dragon was, they had no other chance of survival other than defeating it. Therefore, following Yi Xian's order, the four of them did not say a word and directly took out their magical treasures. Damned ancient demon dragon. Today, this old man will also be a dragon slayer. The person who spoke was called Bai Pa. In his hand was the 100 extinction blade, which was extremely sharp. After Yi Xian gave the order, Bai Pa did not hesitate to slash out with his blade. He did not hold back at all in this slash. It could be said that he had used his full strength. Die for me. Giant strength divine ability. Heaven's eye divine ability. Killing slash. Boom. A powerful ray of light directly slashed at the ancient demon dragon. At this time, the ancient mystic dragon, to be precise, had not woken up at all. It was still sleeping. Therefore, Bai Po's slash hit the target directly. Unfortunately, although Bai Po had used all his strength in this slash, the ancient demon dragon in front of him was not so easy to kill. The huge ray of light successfully slashed the ancient demon dragon's body. It could even be said that the ancient demon dragon did not have the slightest bit of defense. However, in the end, only a shallow scratch was left. Roar! The ancient demon dragon was in pain and let out a loud roar that shook the sky. Then, it opened its huge mouth and casually spat out a dragon's breath. This ancient demon dragon had a huge body of more than 30 meters tall. Although it was smaller than the creatures Yi Xian had seen before, it did not mean that the ancient demon dragon's attack was stronger than those creatures that were 10,000 meters, 100,000 meters, or even 1,000,000 meters. The dragon's breath that was spat out by that huge mouth was extremely terrifying. This old man is in danger. Bai Po wailed and wanted to escape. However, the ancient demon dragon's breath was able to seal the space, so Bai Po had no way to use his special escape technique to escape. Bai Po was so scared that his face turned pale. He thought that he was going to die this time. However, at this time Li Lei made his move. Brother Bai, don't be afraid. Li Lei's figure flashed and threw out a thread-like treasure from his hand. In an instant, it tied up Bai Po and then forcibly pulled him back. All of this was done in the blink of an eye. It could be said that they had good teamwork. At the same time, the other two people also quickly made their move and attacked the ancient demon dragon with all their might. Yi Xian had already said that if they wanted to live, they had to fight with all their might. Only by killing this ancient demon dragon would they have a chance to live. Therefore, at this moment, no one would hold back. Of course, Yi Xian was not idle either. A battle of this level was not something Yi Xian could participate in. 4 intermediate celestial gods and 1 peak superior celestial god. In a battle between 5 powerhouses, even the aftermath of the battle could cause Yi Xian to suffer if he was not careful, let alone participate in it. However, not being able to participate in the battle did not mean that Yi Xian could not help. System, can you help me analyze this ancient demon dragon's data and give me its weakness? Yes, Yi Xian was now asking for help from the system. When the system malfunctioned, it had said that the repair this time would be based on Yi Xian's wishes. Although the repair progress was only a mere 5%, it was equivalent to activating the system. Therefore, as long as Yi Xian was willing, he could begin to integrate the new functions of the system. Ding! System notification. Attention please. Host. The ancient demon dragon is known for its strong defense. It is an ancient variant of the dragon clan. Only the reverse scale on the ancient demon dragon's back has a slightly weaker defense. At the same time, it is also the part closest to the source of its life. It is recommended that the host find the reverse scale and kill the ancient demon dragon. Reverse scale? Chapter 21:15. It was said that all dragons had a reverse scale on their bodies. Simply put, this reverse scale was a special scale that grew in the opposite direction from the other scales. Every dragon clan member only had one. Furthermore, there would definitely be one. Yi Xian did not want to find out why this was the case. He only knew that the reverse scale was his chance to kill the ancient magic dragon. Li Lei, jump behind him. The reverse scale of the ancient magic dragon is on his back. Find the reverse scale and you can kill the ancient magic dragon. Yi Xian shouted loudly as he directly ordered Li Lei and the others. At this time, the ancient magic dragon was in a state of rage. Of course, anyone who was sleeping soundly and was woken up by a slash would probably be furious. The ancient magic dragon's body was emitting purplish-red flames, and the dragon breath in its mouth was constantly spewing out. This dragon breath was the basic attack method of the ancient magic dragon and every dragon. It did not require much preparation time and did not consume much energy. As long as it was willing, it could even keep spewing. However, it was not weak just because the dragon breath did not consume any energy. At this time, the pitiful magma trees around the ancient magic dragon were melted by the terrifying dragon breath. The dragon breath of the ancient magic dragon was several times hotter than the hottest magma. Li Lei and the others immediately understood. It was common sense to find the reverse scale to slay a dragon. However, every dragon's reverse scale was undoubtedly the core of their defense. It was also the existence that they would try to hide. Under normal circumstances, it was easier said than done to find the location of the reverse scale of a dragon. They did not expect Yi Xian to know the location of the reverse scale of the ancient magic dragon. This undoubtedly allowed the four of them to see the light of hope again. Kill! The four of them rushed forward again. Yi Xian could only watch helplessly from the side. In fact, even if the system was in perfect condition, Yi Xian was not qualified to be involved in such a battle. Hence, from waiting, Yi Xian could not do anything else. The battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. In fact, how could the ancient demon dragon not know the importance of its reverse scale? Therefore, Li Lei and the others simply could not find an opportunity to make a move. However, as the battle progressed, the four of them became more and more familiar with each other. Finally, the ancient demon dragon's slight negligence gave Li Lei and the others a chance. Now is the time. Quick attack. Li Lei suddenly threw Bai Pa out. While Bai Pa was in midair, he used his strongest killing move and flew straight towards the ancient demon dragon's back. Roar! The ancient demon dragon, who was attacking another person, noticed Bai Pa's intentions and abruptly turned around, wanting to stop Bai Pa. However, as soon as he turned around, the person who was suppressed by him earlier also rushed towards the ancient demon dragon's back. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Yi Xian stared at the battlefield with his fists tightly clenched. Whether or not they could defeat the ancient demon dragon would depend on this attack. If he failed, then Yi Xian could only be trapped here. However, if he succeeded, then Yi Xian would gain great benefits. It seemed like a blink of an eye, but also like thousands of years had passed. Accompanied by an incomparably loud roar, with the ancient demon dragon as the epicenter, an incomparably huge shockwave suddenly erupted. A blazing shockwave. That was the ancient demon dragon's final frenzy. How could it not be strong? Not good. Yi Xian's figure suddenly retreated. This shockwave was too strong. It could be said that it was enough to shatter Yi Xian's bones. The withered bone sword servants came out and blocked Yi Xian's front. At the same time, one defensive treasure after another was thrown out by Yi Xian. At the same time, Yi Xian also retreated with all his might. However, even so, the shockwave still hit Yi Xian. Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it, it's actually so strong. I was hiding far away, and even used the withered bone sword servants and countless defensive treasures to block it, but I still suffered such a heavy injury. This ancient demon dragon is really too strong. Yi Xian helplessly muttered to himself. At this time, he already knew that Li Lei and the others were most likely dead. Sure enough, when Yi Xian flew back to the battlefield, he could no longer see the 4 corpses. The 4 of them had been completely pulverized by the ancient demon dragon's final attack. Sigh, the 4 of you died for me. I, Yi Xian, will not mistreat you. Let me resurrect you. Yi Xian had the 4 quintessence shards in his hands. They were equivalent to life imprints. With these quintessence shards, he could resurrect the 4 of them. However, the price was extremely high. After all, the quintessence shards in Yi Xian's hands were only small shards. At this time, the ancient demon dragon and the 4 of them had perished together. Yi Xian naturally would not let this go to waste. He directly put the ancient demon dragon's corpse into his devouring space. The ancient demon dragon's entire body was a treasure. It could be said that whether Yi Xian used it to upgrade himself or to repair the system, it was definitely a good thing. Of course, before that, he still had to deal with the gatekeeper in front of him. From the moment the ancient demon dragon died, the gatekeeper had already appeared in front of Yi Xian. Hee, kid, not bad. You actually killed the ancient demon dragon. Not bad, not bad. Here, this is your reward. You can leave now. The gatekeeper did not seem to care about how Yi Xian passed the trial. In his eyes, as long as the ancient demon dragon died, Yi Xian would be considered to have passed the trial. Following the gatekeeper's words, Yi Xian's figure moved again. He was directly teleported away again. Of course, Yi Xian didn't mind. When he arrived outside and confirmed that there was no danger, he began to deal with his rewards. First, he took out the reward given by the gatekeeper. But when he took it out, he was stunned. It was actually an egg. Ding! Congratulations to host. You have obtained a special treasure, the ancient demon dragon egg. Host, please note that the ancient demon dragon can be made with other special materials and special items. As expected, Yi Xian nodded. When he saw the egg, Yi Xian's first reaction was that he was going to get a new item this time. Sure enough, following the system's notification, Yi Xian's guess was undoubtedly correct. However, Yi Xian did not have any other materials at the moment. So, this ancient demon dragon egg could only be put aside for now. This ancient demon dragon could be made with a total of 3 special items. The first one was the ancient demon dragon. Rather than saying that it was a fusion, it was more like a catalyst. This was because this egg originally belonged to the ancient demon dragon. Of course, this undoubtedly required the least amount of resources and at the same time, had the lowest combat power. Chapter 21:16. The second method was to use something called the Heavenly Mystic Body, the ancient celestial dragon. Simply put, it was an enhanced version of the ancient magic dragon, but it looked better. The third method required the 7-star grass, 1-leaf flower, 3-eyed divine stone, and Guhai Bing Xin. The thing that came out was actually called the crystal dragon. Of course, Yi Xian didn't even know what these 4 materials were. Therefore, Yi Xian didn't have any intention of getting the ancient magic dragon's egg. He would think about it in the future. He would just take whatever materials he came across in the future. Besides, devour points weren't that easy to obtain. After looking at the ancient magic dragon's egg, Yi Xian focused on his biggest gain, the ancient magic dragon's corpse, as well as the universe rings of Li Lei and the other 3. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for completing the hidden mission, the last ancient magic dragon. Ding! System notification. System recovery rate increased by 5%. Current recovery rate is 10%. Ding! System notification. Attention to the host. The host can now make a choice. The ancient magic dragon's corpse can increase the host's cultivation by 6 levels, or extract its essence to repair the system by 1%. The host will then receive a reward of 1 level. Ding! Please make your choice. Yi Xian frowned. Choice. The system was actually asking him to choose. One must know that the system rarely did such a thing. It could be said that the system was very humane. However, Yi Xian was keenly aware that the system seemed to be undergoing some kind of change. It was just that this change was happening silently. Even Yi Xian himself didn't know what kind of change would happen. He didn't even know if it was good or bad. Of course, other things aside, it was better to make a choice first. 1% of the system's recovery rate. To be honest, it was very little. However, Yi Xian still resolutely chose the second option. 1% of the system's recovery rate, and he would then receive a reward of 1 level. This was because once the system's recovery was complete, Yi Xian would receive even more benefits. Compared to the earlier recovery of the system, Yi Xian's delay in leveling up was actually not a big deal. After all, not all missions could repair the system. Even if he broke through 6 times, it was just empty talk without a repair mission. System, I choose the second option. Ding! System prompt, the host has made a choice. Ding! System notification. System repair rate increased by 1%, current rate is 11%. Ding! Host has made a breakthrough and is now a level 4 middle true god. Yi Xian nodded. The matter here was considered settled. However, Li Lei and Yi Xian still had to be dealt with. System, I want to revive Li Lei and the others. Is there any way? Ding! System notification. Host can now find special materials to revive Li Lei and the others. Host can now nurture Li Lei and the others' quintessence fragments in the plant space and slowly restore their divine power. Alright, that's all we can do. Yi Xian knew that it was almost impossible to revive the 4 of them immediately. After breaking through to the true god realm, it was no longer that easy to resurrect. As for those people that Yi Xian had killed before, he had already used his divine power to restore them, allowing them to live in the devouring space. However, as long as there was a chance, it was fine. After settling everything, Yi Xian began to notice the situation in front of him. At this moment, Yi Xian was standing in front of a tall tower. The tower was so tall that it reached the clouds. Even if Yi Xian tried his best to see it, he could not see how tall it was. However, the surroundings of the tower were empty. There was nothing. Yi Xian knew that this should be the 3rd stage. He did not hesitate and walked straight in. He pushed open the door of the tower. In an instant, an extremely strong suction force sucked Yi Xian in. At the same time, a voice rang out. Welcome to the Endless Tower. Congratulations, Trial Taker. You have successfully entered the 3rd stage. The rules of the 3rd stage are very simple. You just need to climb to the highest level of the Endless Tower. Then you will pass. Of course, because the difficulty of the Endless Tower is high, you can choose to leave at any time once you have climbed halfway. However, I need to remind you that there are powerful divine beasts in every level of the tower. Enjoy it, Trial Taker. Enjoy this endless slaughter. The one who spoke was, without a doubt, the guardian of the 3rd stage. However, the guardian of the 3rd stage seemed to be even more despicable than the previous 2 stages. He did not even appear. Of course, since the rules were clear, Yi Xian did not need to wait any longer. He lifted his feet and walked towards the 2nd level. It seemed that the bottom level was only used to receive guests. Therefore, there were no divine beasts. However, when Yi Xian walked into the 2nd level, he saw a divine beast. Lower rank 1 deity? Yi Xian was slightly stunned as he looked at the ferocious tiger with bull horns. He was incomparably astonished. He was actually only a rank 1 god. Wasn't that too simple? Yi Xian casually killed the divine beast. However, what surprised him was that after the beast was killed, it turned into a puff of green smoke and disappeared. Could this be a doppelganger? Of course, Yi Xian did not care so much. He walked straight to the 2nd level. It's still a lower rank 1 deity. However, there are 10 of them this time. Since they were not a threat, Yi Xian casually killed them and continued to walk forward. He continued to kill and climb. Yi Xian could not remember how many levels he had climbed. However, he had already understood the rules here. The monsters here would change every 10 levels. There was 1 on the 1st level and 10 on the 2nd level. There were 50 on the 3rd level and so on until there were 1,000 on the 10th level. Of course, the levels would not change. However, at the 11th level, there would be a lower rank 5 deity monster. Then, there would be a peak lower deity monster. Then there would be a mid-rank 1 deity monster. Then there would be a mid-rank 5 deity monster. Now, Yi Xian was facing 1,000 mid-rank 5 deity monsters. To be honest, Yi Xian was very tired at the moment. One should know that Yi Xian was only a mid-rank 4 deity. However, he had to face 1,000 mid-rank 5 deity monsters. It could be said that the pressure was immense. Yi Xian stood quietly at the entrance. At the entrance, the divine beasts would not take the initiative to attack. It could be considered as giving the challengers a chance to take a breather. However, Yi Xian had tried. He could only stay here for an incense's time. Once the time was up, he would be pushed out by a force. Chapter 21:17. Now, there were divine beasts of the middle-grade true god realm. The next wave would be peak middle-grade true gods. Moreover, this trial seemed to have no end. Standing on the spiral staircase, Yi Xian could see that there were countless levels above. Endless trial. Endless slaughter. Indeed, it lived up to its name. Suddenly, a force came from behind Yi Xian and pushed Yi Xian inside. It turned out that the rest time was over. In an instant, those divine beasts rushed toward Yi Xian like a flood. Yi Xian had no choice but to take out the God Slayer and start the battle again. In such a trial, one should not try to use any powerful attacks, because that would only be a waste of one's divine power. The wisest choice was to use the most energy and divine power to battle. Although he had the super recovery ability of the mighty body of the war god, under such circumstances, there were times when he could not make ends meet. After all, every time he killed a divine beast on a level, he would not be allowed to stay on that level for too long. Of course, there was a limit to the time he could kill the divine beasts. Yi Xian casually swung his sword and killed a divine beast that was pouncing toward him. He watched as the divine beast turned into white smoke. In his heart he was thinking, what should I do? This trial seemed to have no end. Even if Yi Xian passed the peak middle-grade true god realm level, even if he passed the peak upper-grade true god realm level, then, what should he do with the divine beasts after that? What's more, there were those who had surpassed the divine beasts' realm. Continuing to fight was not a solution at all. Yi Xian frowned as he continuously slaughtered the divine beasts in his hands. At the same time, he was also thinking in his heart. However, no matter how hard Yi Xian tried, he realized that he could not solve the problem in front of him. In the end, all the divine beasts were killed. Yi Xian could only helplessly go to the next level. Since he was already here, he might as well take it easy. However, when Yi Xian went to the next level, the voice of the guardian of the third stage finally sounded again. Yo, not bad, young man. Congratulations. You have passed the first trial and obtained the title of Beginner Endless Trial Tester. Ha! However, I'm afraid that everyone who can come here will be able to obtain this title. Oh, I forgot to tell you. As long as you kill a wave of divine beasts that are about the same level as you will be able to obtain the elementary title. Then you can make a choice. Do you want to continue the challenge or leave directly? And let me give you a kind reminder. The lower your cultivation level, the lower the difficulty level of the divine beasts you need to pass through. As long as you obtain the Super Endless Trial title, you will have passed my test. How about it? Have you made up your mind? Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the words of the guardian of the fourth level. Fortunately, this endless trial was automatically adjusted according to the realm of the person who entered, and it was not really necessary to fight to the last level. It looked like Yi Xian still had a chance to pass. But even so, Yi Xian decided to withdraw for the time being. Guardian, does this mean that after I obtain the elementary trial tester title, as long as I have time, I can come back for the trial again? Of course. As long as you are willing, you can come back for the trial at any time. However, you only have 3 chances. After you use up all 3 chances, you will no longer have the right to enter this place. Alright, I understand. I choose to leave for the time being. Yi Xian immediately stated his decision. He knew that with his current strength, he would not be able to pass at all. Alright, since you have decided, I will send you off. These are 3 directional teleportation talismans. I will send you directly out of the trial grounds. If you want to continue the challenge, crush the talisman and you will be able to come here directly. Let me give you another reminder. If your cultivation level increases and you come back, the divine beast's cultivation level will also be adjusted accordingly. Do you understand? Alright, I understand. Following Yi Xian's reply, a white light flashed and Yi Xian disappeared on the spot. By the time Yi Xian reacted, he had appeared in a foreign place. In other words, the guardian of the fourth stage had sent Yi Xian out of the Valley of Despair. *CK. I just wanted to see if I could find any materials in the Valley of Despair to strengthen myself. The guardian actually sent me out. Yi Xian was speechless. He had never intended to leave the Valley of Despair. But since he was already out, there was no other way. Luckily, he could return at any time. Yi Xian had to complete the Valley of Despair. After all, The system repair mission was still there. Yi Xian could imagine that as long as he completed the exploration of the Valley of Despair, he would definitely receive many system repairs. Even a complete system repair was not impossible. Since he was already out, Yi Xian could also go out and look for suitable materials to strengthen himself. The best way was to strengthen or break through the 2 demigod bloodlines. Although the demigod bloodline was extremely powerful, it was still very difficult to break through. But obviously, if Yi Xian wanted to pass the trial of the Boundless Tower, then just Yi Xian's demigod bloodline was not enough. Of course, it was not that easy to break through. Perhaps it would be very difficult to obtain some strengthening. Yi Xian released his divine telekinesis. He believed that the guardian would not be able to send him too far away. However, Yi Xian still underestimated. This was the realm of the gods. The concept of the realm of the gods was different from other places. Although the guardian had only casually sent Yi Xian away, it had directly sent Yi Xian thousands of miles away. Using his divine telekinesis, Yi Xian saw a huge city in the distance. Since he had discovered the city, Yi Xian did not delay and immediately flew towards the city. Carefree City. That's a good name. At this moment, Yi Xian was standing outside the huge city gate. Looking at the bustling crowd, he was a little surprised. This was because he saw that most of the people here were just ordinary people, and they looked very strange. Taurens, kobolds, birdmen with wings, and snail people with huge shells on their backs. What was going on? Most importantly, these people's cultivation levels were extremely low. There were even people who did not have any cultivation levels. Just what was going on? Welcome to Carefree City. Is this your first time here? Just as Yi Xian was puzzled, a young man ran in front of him. He had no cultivation level. He was actually a mortal. Yi Xian frowned slightly and asked the person, "What's going on with this city?" Chapter 21:18. What do you mean by what's going on? Sir, I don't know how to answer your question. The man rubbed his head with a confused look on his face. Oh, what I mean is, why are there so many mortals here? Isn't this the realm of the gods? Yi Xian could only answer directly. However, his words frightened the man so much that he immediately knelt on the ground. Honorable God, this humble one has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive this humble one. Yi Xian looked at the man. Get up. I'm asking you a question. Just answer me. Yes, Lord God, it's like this. There are originally many native races in the realm of the gods, as well as some lower realm creatures brought up by Lord God. However, although this is the realm of the gods, not everyone can become a god. Over time, the native races of the realm of the gods, as well as mortals like me who were brought up by the ancestor from the 8th heaven, formed the mortal world of the realm of the gods. Yi Xian nodded. So that was the case. With his current realm, he was indeed immortal, even if he was in the undying sovereign realm. In any case, it was just a name. What's more, a deity could only be called immortal with a relatively high realm. This was not surprising. Perhaps some people obtained some special abilities after condensing the godhead, and many people chose to bring their family or disciples from the lower realm to the realm of the gods. However, the realm of the gods was extremely dangerous. Who could guarantee that they would never fall? However, the realm of the gods was full of divine power, and it was more suitable for cultivation. Naturally, many people would release their family members and disciples directly. As for the native races, Yi Xian could not say anything. However, it was strange that there were natives in the realm of the gods. Yi Xian ignored the man and walked directly into the worry-free city. Compared to the city that Yi Xian had entered previously, which was built by people with godheads, this city was much more lively. Many people were moving in and out of the worry-free city. Countless figures shuttled back and forth. In the divine realm, it was normal for even an ordinary mortal to live for thousands of years. Therefore, more and more people came. Of course, the divine world was so big that a city with a population of 1 million was just a drop in the ocean. Yi Xian casually walked around and found out the origin of the forgotten city. The city was built by the city lord, the carefree old man. In the beginning, there were only a few hundred people, but after tens of thousands of years of development, the city grew to its current size. The carefree city was equivalent to the private territory of the carefree old man. However, even so, there was still something inside. The carefree old man built the carefree pavilion in the carefree city and selected elite disciples to nurture. Needless to say, He really managed to nurture some of them. Today, there were hundreds of deities in the carefree city. It was the most powerful existence among the dozens of cities around it. Of course, this had nothing to do with Yi Xian. After casually looking around, he didn't find anything that Yi Xian needed, so Yi Xian turned around and prepared to leave. However, before he could even leave, he encountered something interesting. An army was led by an inferior heavenly god, 3 superior heavenly gods, and a dozen inferior heavenly gods. They were actually outside the carefree city. Yi Xian moved and stood at the top of the tallest building in the carefree city. Yi Xian wanted to see what was going to happen here. Carefree old man, get out here. Just as Yi Xian was ready to watch a good show, the heavenly god outside the city shouted loudly toward the carefree city. The huge sound wave even killed many mortals in the city. Damn it, old man Tian Ke, what are you trying to do? In the blink of an eye, another inferior heavenly god rushed out. At the same time, a protective barrier appeared above the carefree city. Countless soldiers rushed to the top of the city wall. Humph, what am I trying to do? Carefree old man, Mo Shanggu has ordered you to capture the totem beasts. It's fine if you want to die, but why do you want to harm us? If you don't hand over the totem beasts, you are openly making an enemy out of Mo Shanggu. If you want to die, do you want to drag us down with you? Haha, you are you. Mo Shanggu is strong. We wandering cultivators naturally can't afford to offend him. However, what right do they have to capture my divine beasts with just one sentence? What right do they have to ask me to deliver it? At this point, Yi Xian finally understood that it was because of the totem beasts and Mo Shanggu. When Yi Xian first came to the divine realm, he had also obtained a totem beast when he arrived at the Myriad Beast sect. Of course, compared to the dozens of totem beasts that the Myriad Beast sect had, the pitiful totem beast in Carefree City was nothing. Unfortunately, Carefree City didn't have the strength of the Myriad Beast sect, so they didn't even have the qualifications to exchange for the totem beasts. Mo Shangji's one sentence forced Carefree City to hand over the totem beasts, and they even had to deliver them personally. To put it bluntly, it was all because they were too weak. The 2 heavenly god stage experts were still bickering. However, Yi Xian wasn't prepared to continue watching, because there was no need for Yi Xian to continue paying attention to him. Strength. Everything was a problem caused by strength. What he saw this time made Yi Xian understand once again that only by possessing strength would he not be bullied by others. When Yi Xian left, sounds of killing could already be heard coming from the direction of Carefree City. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were fighting, but it was all because of 2 heavenly god experts. Perhaps in their hearts, they didn't care about the lives of mortals. Yi Xian summoned his Pegasus and left at lightning speed. He wasn't looking for a mortal city. Maybe he could go there to take a look when he was bored, but it wouldn't help Yi Xian increase his strength at all. Very soon, Yi Xian found another city. However, this was not a city of mortals. It was a real city, a city that belonged to the gods. Yes, this is the place, Ling Xian Court. I didn't expect Ling Xian Court to be here. Then, I can go there and see if the materials I need can be found here. Yi Xian landed on the ground and recalled his Pegasus at the same time. He walked into the city alone. His target was very clear. Ling Xian Court. I heard that Ling Xian Court will be auctioning a few precious treasures this time, but I don't know what kind of treasures they are. Sigh, so what if you've heard about it? We're not qualified to participate. This auction is an internal auction. Only those invited by Ling Xian Pavilion are qualified to participate. Without an invitation, no one can enter. Chapter 21:19. It looked like Yi Xian had come at just the right time. Auction. Not bad, not bad. Generally speaking, there would always be a few good items appearing at an auction. Of course, whether one could obtain them or not would depend on one's own wealth. This time, Yi Xian would not be as hard-pressed as the last time. He would use the divine crystals on him carefully. No matter what, Yi Xian was still a person with a net worth in the millions. However, how would one obtain an invitation letter? Oh right, Yi Xian suddenly remembered. When he passed the first stage in the Valley of Despair, wasn't there a person who happened to be an elder of Ling Xian Court? His token was now in his hands. In that case, could he use this thing to obtain an invitation letter? Or perhaps the right to enter? At this thought, Yi Xian did not hesitate and walked directly to the attendant of Ling Xian court. "Honorable guest, how may I help you?" The attendant asked Yi Xian respectfully. "Oh, I want an invitation letter to the auction. How can I obtain one?" "Sir, I am very sorry, but the auction this time is not a public auction. It is a small, internal auction. Therefore, apart from those who have been invited, no one else is allowed to participate." Although the attendant spoke tactfully, the people around Yi Xian were amused. "Haha, am I seeing things? A mere mid-level true god wants to obtain an invitation letter to the auction? Doesn't he know that the lowest level of invitation this time is the heavenly god realm? Furthermore, he actually went to ask someone from Ling Xian court. How stupid. Isn't that so? I'm dying of laughter. What does he think Ling Xian court is? What does he think Ling Xian court's internal auction is? Can anyone go just because they want to? Is that still an internal auction?" There was a lot of discussion. Moreover, they were all saying that Yi Xian was overestimating himself. Yi Xian did not care about these people at all. Who cared what these people said? What Yi Xian wanted to do was the most important thing. "Oh, so that's how it is. Then I would like to ask, can I use this to exchange for an invitation letter?" Yi Xian did not hesitate and took out the elder's jade pendant. When the attendant saw the item in Yi Xian's hand, he was shocked. One had to know that Ling Xian Pavilion was originally an independent force, so there was naturally a detailed division of power. As for the elders, it could be said that in each pavilion, there were usually only 1 or 2 elders in charge. Who would have thought that someone would use an elder's token to exchange for an invitation letter? Beads of sweat instantly appeared on the attendant's forehead. He submissively said to Yi Xian, Sir, please wait for a moment. This lowly one will immediately invite the elder out." As he spoke, the attendant bowed to the Yi Xian and ran away. Such a dramatic turn of events caused everyone to widen their eyes in shock. No way! Where did this guy come from? What was that thing in his hand? Why did it make the attendant so terrified? In an instant, everyone in the hall shut their mouths. As for the few people who were discussing Yi Xian at the beginning, their expressions changed drastically. They looked at Yi Xian cautiously, as if afraid that Yi Xian would pursue the matter. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not care about these people at all, so he did not pay them any attention. Very soon, the elder of this branch rushed out in a hurry. This disciple greets the Grand Supreme Elder. What no one expected was that even this elder would be so respectful to Yi Xian, and even kneel down to greet him. In fact, Yi Xian himself did not understand what was going on. As it turned out, since Ling Xian Pavilion was a place of treasures, there were naturally countless capable people. Ling Xian Pavilion's elder's token was a very special item. No one knew how this item was refined. However, every elder only had one token. Furthermore, this token had its own spiritual intelligence and was reinforced with several unique seals. Unless the owner of the token was willing, this token would not follow anyone else. No matter how powerful one was, there was no way to forcibly control it because this token had a self-destructing effect. Of course, the elders of Ling Xian Pavilion were free to choose their successors, which meant that this token could be inherited by a disciple. However, there was no doubt that as long as one had the token, one would have the authority of an elder. It did not matter how Yi Xian obtained this elder's token, nor did it matter what kind of thoughts that person had at that time. But now, Yi Xian was holding this token in his hand, which meant that Yi Xian was the owner of this token and a legitimate elder of Ling Xian Pavilion. Furthermore, he was not an ordinary elder. "Get up first." Yi Xian was stunned and said. Now, even Yi Xian himself was still in a daze. What was going on? After that Ling Xian Pavilion elder stood up, Yi Xian continued to ask, "This token was indeed given to me by an elder of Ling Xian Pavilion. However, I am not an elder of Ling Xian Pavilion. I think you must have misunderstood something." Haha, Grand Supreme Elder, don't tease your disciple. The rules of Ling Xian Pavilion have not changed for tens of millions of years. Perhaps the previous Grand Supreme Elder really gave this token to you for some reason. However, as long as you have this token, you are an elder of Ling Xian Pavilion. Every elder's token in Ling Xian Pavilion is fixed. In other words, the authority of every token will not change because of a person. Ling Xian Pavilion only recognizes tokens and not people. F***ck. Yi Xian was stunned. Only recognizing tokens and not people? What kind of stupid rule was this? Wouldn't that be able to fool the people of Lingxian Pavilion with a fake token? Of course, Yi Xian also understood that it was almost impossible to fake a token. After all, Lingxian Pavilion was not a small faction. Yi Xian did not want to delve into this matter. His main goal now was to get an invitation letter. As for this token, he would wait until the next time he met Master Ku and ask him properly. All right, I just want to ask you for an invitation letter this time. I want to participate in this auction, but unfortunately, I don't have one. I wonder if you can make it convenient for me? Yi Xian said directly. After hearing this, the elder's face revealed a strange smile. Then he said, "Well, Grand Supreme Elder, do you really not know? You have the Grand Supreme Elder's token in your hand. If you want to enter the internal auction organized by our pavilion, you can enter at any time. The token in your hand represents your authority and is more useful than any invitation letter." Chapter 21:20. At that moment, the people around Yi Xian, who had been discussing Yi Xian earlier, were all dumbfounded. They were both envious and terrified. How could a person who even an elder of Lingxian court treat with such respect be a simple person? Everyone silently watched Yi Xian's back as he walked into the inner hall of Lingxian court. Many people were already considering how they could curry favor with Yi Xian. The reason Yi Xian followed the elder to the inner hall was, of course, not because of the invitation letter, but because he wanted to know what good items would be auctioned this time. Yi Xian was even prepared to buy anything suitable in advance. This was also another benefit of the Grand Supreme Elder's token. Grand Supreme Elder, take a look. These are all the items that will be auctioned this time. The elder handed over a list to Yi Xian. The list clearly listed all the items that would be auctioned this time. Of course, 1/3 of the items would be auctioned by Lingxian court, while the other 2/3 would be auctioned by others. Very soon, Yi Xian looked through the entire list. Among them, 3 items caught Yi Xian's attention the most. The first item was called the Ancient Demon Finger. That's right, it was a finger of the ancient Great Demon God. It was said that the Great Demon God had already reached the Master God realm. His physical body was simply incomparably strong. There was still a huge difference between the ancient demon gods and the current demon gods. In fact, whether it was the ancient demon gods or the demon gods, they were all several times stronger than the current gods. As for the root cause, it was in the divine ability. Especially for demon gods. Demons generally walked the path of cultivation. They constantly strengthened their physical bodies to form a godhead. However, demon gods also had various divine abilities. It was just that after countless years, many demon gods' special divine abilities had been lost. The original owner of this demon god's finger was a famous ancient great demon god, the finger of the Heaven Slaughter demon god. No one knew how many divine abilities the Heaven Slaughter devil god possessed. However, everyone knew that the most powerful divine ability of the Heaven Slaughter devil god was his finger of annihilation. It was said that if the Heaven Slaughter demon god wanted to kill someone, he only needed to casually point his finger and that person would die. Even those of the same level of cultivation would not be able to block his finger. Of course, Yi Xian did not care about these rumors. What he cared about was that the finger bone contained a special substance that could strengthen his sword god bloodline. I must get my hands on this thing, Yi Xian said to himself in his heart. However, when he saw that the note was actually addressed to him, he could only smile bitterly. The second item was a flower called the Lasting Soul Flower. The long soul flower only had one use, and that was to nurture the soul. Yi Xian had said that he wanted to save Li Lei and the others, so Yi Xian had to get his hands on the Lasting Soul Flower. Ha! Did Lingxian Pavilion take this out themselves? Yi Xian looked at the note and was slightly surprised. However, he immediately smiled. Hey, who are you? Did your pavilion auction this Lasting Soul Flower? Yi Xian turned around and asked the elder of Lingxian Pavilion. Grand Elder, you can just call me Little White. This Lasting Soul Flower is not a rare item. Someone gave it to my pavilion a few months ago. Do you like this flower, Grand Elder? Yes, I happen to need this type of material. Yi Xian nodded. Oh, since that's the case, Grand Elder can buy it directly. Grand Elder can enjoy a 50% discount in our pavilion. Disciple will make the decision to erase your transaction fee. Grand Elder only needs to pay 130,000 divine crystals for this long soul flower. Oh, so cheap? Well then, help me get it. Haha, all right, Grand Elder. However, this long soul flower is only an ordinary divine flower. If it is used to refine magic treasures, it can only be used by those below the heavenly god realm. I wonder what Grand Elder wants it for? Yi Xian was at a loss for words. This guy didn't know that he was only a mid-level true god. Furthermore, he was a newcomer to the realm of the gods. If it wasn't for a coincidence, he wouldn't even have the strength to enter Ling Xian Pavilion, let alone participate in the auction. Of course, that person was just asking casually. He didn't have to get to the bottom of it. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't reply, that person casually ordered an attendant to get the lasting soul flower. As for Yi Xian, he was looking at the last item. Ever since Yi Xian came to the realm of the gods, he first killed the totem beast of the Divine Beast sect. Then, he was chased by the disciples of the Divine Beast sect and fell into the Valley of Despair. It could be said that many of his abilities were not only unusable due to the system being damaged, but also because he didn't have the opportunity to use them. However, this didn't mean that Yi Xian gave up on his original items. For example, the 100-Beast Sword Attendant. At this moment, the item placed in front of Yi Xian was a mystical water-blaze stone. This was a very peculiar stone because it was neither solid nor liquid, neither gas nor void. Simply put, this stone's form was a very peculiar state of self-combustion. This mystical water-blaze stone could self-combust at any time. However, the energy it produced would be confined around the stone's body and quickly condense into the stone's body. This cycle would repeat for eternity. Of course, other than its peculiar form, the most important thing was its effect. This was an excellent material to strengthen the 100-Beast Sword Servants. Not only could it increase the 100-Beast Sword Servants' attack and defense, but it could also increase the 100-Beast Sword Servants' tenacity. The concept of tenacity wasn't easy to understand. Simply put, as long as this mystical water-blaze stone was combined with the 100-Beast Sword Servants, then the 100-Beast Sword Servants would undergo unexpected changes. He had to get his hands on this thing. Even if he didn't get the ancient demon god's fingerbone, he must get this mystical water-blaze stone. Yi Xian looked at this item. It was still on auction. Since that was the case, he didn't look at it any longer. Instead, he took the long soul flower from Elder Xiao Bai's hands. After paying the divine crystals, he asked Elder Xiao Bai, how much longer until the auction? In reply to Grand Supreme Elder, the original plan was to hold it in 3 days. Is that okay? What did Yi Xian mean by is that okay? If possible, Yi Xian wanted to hold it now. Of course, Yi Xian couldn't say this out loud. After all, it was impossible. All right, 3 days it is. I'll come back in 3 days. Yes, Grand Supreme Elder. Chapter 21-21. Yi Xian was stunned. To be honest, he did not know much about the Grand Supreme Elder's identity. However, it would be good for him to meet the Grand Supreme Elder. After all, Master Ku did not tell him clearly that his token had such great authority. Sound transmission talismans, locator beasts, and other small treasures were very common even in the realm of the gods. Moreover, the distance was very far. After all, the realm of the gods was so big. How could it be possible to communicate without some conventional means? Yi Xian decisively condensed a few sound transmission talismans and handed them over to Elder Xiao Bai. Then he said, if there's anything you need, you can directly send me a sound transmission. Then, I'll come and disturb you in 3 days. Aya, Grand Supreme Elder, listen to what you're saying. It's my honor to have you here. There's no need to disturb you. Yi Xian smiled and did not say much. Instead, he walked out directly. Since he had to wait here for the auction to start, he naturally could not leave. After all, 3 days was actually very short. Very quickly, Yi Xian found an inn called the Assembly of Gods Pavilion and asked for a room to stay. Speaking of which, Yi Xian had not tasted the food of the realm of the gods yet. This time, Yi Xian was taking a break from his busy schedule. Naturally, he would not miss this opportunity. After spending more than 1,000 divine crystals, Yi Xian asked for a table of food and wine. He casually placed the god slayer on the table and leisurely tasted the food of the realm of the gods. To be honest, although 1,000 divine crystals was indeed very expensive, this enjoyment was definitely not ordinary. Yi Xian only ate a few mouthfuls of the food and wine and felt extremely refreshed. However, when there were too many people, it was inevitable that there would be trouble. Moreover, especially when Yi Xian was being targeted. It's this guy. I heard that he has some connections in Ling Xian court. However, since he is a member of Ling Xian Pavilion, this young master would like to see what he is capable of. Qi Kong, go and teach this brat a good lesson for me. Let him know that this is the territory of the Jubao Pavilion. The people of Ling Xian Pavilion better behave themselves. Yes, young master. A middle-aged man bowed respectfully to this young master. With a wave of his hand, he led his 3 followers towards Yi Xian. The Jubao Pavilion was an existence equivalent to the Ling Xian Pavilion. However, Ling Xian Pavilion had a wide range of branches, and anyone who came was a guest. On the other hand, Jubao Pavilion only dealt with clans and sects, and didn't care about individual gods. If the Rain Admiration Pavilion that only dealt with women was included, then these 3 auction houses were undoubtedly the 3 largest auction houses in the eastern region of the 9 Radiance Divine Realm. Including Mo Shanggu and all the other powers that Yi Xian had come into contact with so far, were actually only powers in the 9 Radiance Divine Realm. Of course, the 9 Radiance Divine Realm was merely one of the countless medium-sized powers in the Divine Dimension, and the master of the 9 Radiance Divine Realm was even an extraordinary expert at the Overgod Realm. These matters were too distant for the current Yi Xian. Good wine. It really is good wine. The wine of the God Realm is really different. It's a pity that it contains too much energy. I have to think of a way to dilute it so that my family can taste it. Yes, I also have to give some to Blackhorn, Old Tree, and the others. Yi Xian put down his wine cup, and a faint smile hung on his face. However, in the next moment, his eyes narrowed, and he casually slapped someone to the side. As it turned out, Qi Kong and the others had already come to Yi Xian's side. However, Qi Kong was attracted by Yi Xian's God Slayer. Of course, this was also Yi Xian's fault. He just had to show off the God Slayer outside, and it was impossible for him not to be noticed. Therefore, one of Qi Kang's followers understood and prepared to directly snatch the sword, which led to the scene of Yi Xian casually slapping him. That follower had the cultivation of a first-grade upper true god. When he saw that Yi Xian was only a mid-grade true god, he naturally looked down on him. However, he didn't expect that before he could even touch the God Slayer, he would be slapped by Yi Xian first. If not for his divine power automatically protecting his body, this slap would have sent him flying. How dare you hit me? The follower looked at Yi Xian in shock. In his eyes, Yi Xian was only a mid-grade true god. How would he dare to resist them? Unexpectedly, Yi Xian really did hit him. Therefore, for a moment, he didn't react. So what if I hit you? Even if I kill you, it's your own fault. Yi Xian casually held the God Slayer in his hand, and then looked at the 4 people in front of him. 1 low-level heavenly god, 2 high-level true gods, and 1 peak mid-level true god. The strength of these people seemed to be very strong. Yi Xian was secretly vigilant. However, other than offending the myriad beasts' divine sect, he didn't seem to have any conflicts with anyone. Why would someone come looking for trouble with him? A mere mid-grade true god's cultivation was at the bottom of the divine world. Yi Xian didn't expect that someone would come looking for him just for a meal. How unlucky. Haha brat, you sure talk big. You want to kill me? You. A mere mid-grade true god dares to threaten to kill me? I think you're the one who's looking for death. When the follower heard Yi Xian's words, he was immediately happy. He knew very well that they came looking for Yi Xian to cause trouble, so he wasn't afraid of causing trouble. This was what the young master ordered, so of course he didn't care. At this time, when he heard Yi Xian's threat, he laughed out loud. However, he seemed to have forgotten that he was slapped by Yi Xian just now. Yi Xian didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he picked up the cup of wine on the table and drank it again, savoring the endless delicious taste. When the follower saw that Yi Xian was ignoring him, he secretly looked at Qi Kong. When he saw Qi Kong nodding, the follower didn't hesitate anymore and directly grabbed at Yi Xian. Brat. You're the one who's looking for death. Then, let me fulfill your wish. This grab wasn't as simple as just grabbing. It went straight for Yi Xian's head. He was prepared to take Yi Xian's life. Although it was Yi Xian's first time in the realm of the gods, he knew that it was best not to make enemies. However, since he was being bullied, there was no need to tolerate it. In an instant, Yi Xian also made his move. Deity Vanquishing Slash. Boom. Yi Xian's attack was incomparably fast. So what if you're a high-grade true god? In front of the deity vanquishing slash, under the deity vanquishing slash, there was no need to think about taking advantage of him. After a loud bang, the slash actually had the effect of a critical hit. This high-grade true god was just a rank 1 high-grade true god. In addition, he wasn't prepared. How could he resist? He was actually killed by Yi Xian's slash. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. In fact, although he wasn't afraid of these people, he didn't intend to make a big conflict. Chapter 21-22. What the hell was going on? Great. There was no room for negotiation. However, since he had already killed someone, Yi Xian might as well go all the way. He casually put the follower's corpse and his interspatial ring into his devouring space. Of course, Yi Xian wouldn't choose to break through at this time. At the very least, unless he had no other choice, he wouldn't break through. After all, the requirements of the endless refinement were there. If Yi Xian were to break through now, then the difficulty of the endless refinement would increase when he returned. In that case, Yi Xian would not be able to achieve anything by coming here. How dare you kill someone? Seeing that Yi Xian had actually killed his companion the moment he made a move, Qi Kong was also extremely astonished. The key point was that Yi Xian was only an intermediate god. Qi Kong even had a feeling that even if he were to face that sword, he would not have the slightest chance of dodging it. That sword strike was simply too dazzling. At this time, there were still some diners in the inn. However, when they saw the conflict between Yi Xian and Qi Kong, they immediately turned around and left. Yi Xian did not know who Qi Kong and the others were, but the diners did. Qi Kong was the personal bodyguard of the young master of the Endless Treasures Pavilion, the strongest faction in the city. He was not someone the diners could afford to offend. They did not even dare to stay to watch the battle. Of course, they were also very curious as to who had the guts to provoke the people of the Endless Treasures Pavilion. One had to know that the Endless Treasures Pavilion existed in the form of a family. In other words, the young master of this pavilion was also a member of the main family. His background was extremely powerful. You have seen whether I dare to kill or not. Why? Do you also want to test if my sword is sharp enough? Yi Xian looked at Qi Kong indifferently. Since the conflict had erupted, there was no point in saying anything more. Humph, kid. Do you know who we are? I don't care who you are. Did you ask me if you want to touch my sword? How dare you? Don't think that we won't dare to kill you just because you are related to Ling Xian Pavilion. To our young master, killing you is just like killing an ant. Qi Kang's words made Yi Xian raise his eyebrows slightly. It seemed like there was someone behind this guy. Oh, young master? So you are just a dog. Then, let your young master come over and talk. I don't want to waste my breath on a dog. What did you say? Qi Kong was enraged. An incomparably powerful aura erupted from his body. The pressure of a heavenly god realm powerhouse suddenly erupted. No matter what, he was still a heavenly god realm expert, yet he was actually scolded like a dog by a mid-level true god. If it was anyone else, they would find it hard to accept. The example of challenging someone of a higher realm was obvious, so this was not the first time that the surrounding people had seen a true god mocking a heavenly god. Just as Qi Kong was about to make a move, a voice made him stop what he was doing. Yes, it was the young master who had walked over. The young master had only wanted Qi Kong to test Yi Xian's background. Who would have thought that Yi Xian would kill someone without a word? Furthermore, he had killed a superior deity with his mid-level deity cultivation. This was secondary. The main thing was that Yi Xian had inadvertently revealed his Supreme Elder's token when he killed that person. The Supreme Elder of Ling Xian Pavilion wasn't someone to be trifled with. It could be said that the power behind Yi Xian was stronger than the young master's. It should be known that the elder who controlled a branch was only an ordinary elder, while the Supreme Elder was an existence equivalent to the regional supervising elder. Therefore, when the young master saw Yi Xian's token, his heart skipped a beat. Although he did want to cause trouble for the people of Ling Xian Pavilion, offending a Supreme Elder of Ling Xian Pavilion? At least for now, the young master didn't have the guts to do so. The young master walked over to Yi Xian and cupped his fists slightly. His etiquette was very perfunctory. Of course, if it had been someone close to Yi Xian who had been killed, Yi Xian probably wouldn't have been able to tolerate it. I am Hongmeng Xiao Kei from Jubao Pavilion. How should I address you? The Hongmeng family. It was the family that controlled Jubao Pavilion. Are you the owner of this dog? Yi Xian asked indifferently as he pointed at Qi Kong casually. Qi Kong was so angry that his whole body was trembling. However, he didn't dare act presumptuously in front of Hongmeng Shao Quebec. He could only stare coldly at Yi Xian. Yes, I am his master. Since you are from Lingxian Pavilion, why are you in a restaurant run by Jubao Pavilion? Why? Are you trying to stir up trouble? Although Hongmeng Shao Ke was wary of Yi Xian's identity, that didn't mean that he was afraid of Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian was only a mid-level true god. If he hadn't had that token, he would have been worse than an ant in front of Hongmeng Shao Quebec. Oh, does this restaurant belong to your family? However, even if that's the case, why can't I come in when your restaurant is open for business? I don't think I see a sign outside your restaurant that says that people from Lingxian Pavilion are not allowed to enter, right? As Yi Xian spoke, he was once again extremely curious about the Supreme Elder's token that Master Moonless had left for him. It seemed that this token had a lot of uses, and the authority it represented was also extremely great. All right, there really isn't one. Hongmeng Shao Ke was slightly taken aback by Yi Xian's words, but he didn't refute. Although the Lingxian Pavilion and the Treasure Gathering Pavilion were competitors and would fight in the open and in the dark, they didn't say that it was on the surface. Yi Xian's question was indeed something that made Hongmeng Ke not know how to answer. Since that's the case, I'm eating in your restaurant. Logically speaking, I'm your guest. However, your dog bit your guest. Instead of keeping your dog in check, you came to find trouble with me, your guest. This doesn't seem right, does it? Yi Xian lightly smiled. The corners of his mouth were obviously filled with ridicule. He wanted to see what this bullshit young master could do. Of course, Yi Xian was already prepared. If the other party really wanted to make a move, Yi Xian would immediately run away. After all, Yi Xian couldn't beat these people. All right, we'll admit that we were unreasonable today. Manager, put his bill on me. Let's go. Was Hongmeng Shao Ke admitting defeat? Yi Xian looked at Hongmeng Shao Ke in astonishment, but he was slightly wary. In fact, a barking dog wouldn't bite, but a silent dog would bite very viciously. It was obvious that Hongmeng Shao Ke belonged to the latter category. In other words, Yi Xian's troubles had only just begun. Sure enough, as soon as Hongmeng Shao Ke left the restaurant, he immediately ordered Qi Kong, "Go and find this guy. Go, investigate this brat's background for me. Humph, daring to offend this young master. I want him to die without even knowing how." Chapter 21-23. It turned out that the reason Hongmeng Shao Ke hadn't made a move earlier was because he was afraid of Yi Xian's token. Since someone was footing the bill, Yi Xian naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony. He immediately ordered all the best ingredients in the restaurant. So what if he couldn't finish them? Who cared if he could finish them? In any case, Yi Xian didn't have to pay for them himself. In 3 days, Yi Xian had spent a total of more than 300,000 divine crystals. Not only did this guy eat by himself, but he also invited anyone who entered the restaurant to eat with him. The restaurant owner's face had turned white from Yi Xian's eating. Unfortunately, he couldn't do anything about it. As for Hongmeng Shao Ke's expression when he saw the bill, Yi Xian couldn't care less. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had already arrived at Lingxian Court's internal auction. "Grand Supreme Elder, you're finally here. Please follow me. I've already prepared a VIP room for you." "Why? Are you guys not going to hold the auction if I'm not here?" Elder Xiaobai smiled awkwardly but didn't say anything. However, Yi Xian was right. Elder Xiaobai really wouldn't have dared to hold the auction if he hadn't been here. In fact, he had already arrived at the area's supervising elder. The area's supervising elder had only one message for him. Use all means possible to serve Elder Yi Xian well. Also, try your best to keep him here until we arrive. To put it bluntly, no matter what method Elder Xiaobai used, he had to leave Yi Xian behind. He absolutely couldn't make Yi Xian unhappy. Although Elder Xiaobai didn't know the exact reason, he was very sure that Yi Xian's current status was no longer as simple as a Grand Supreme Elder. Elder Xiaobai summoned a beautiful attendant and led Yi Xian to the private room. Then, he immediately returned to his own room and released a signal. "Supervising Elder, Yi Xian is already here for the auction. Please come over quickly." Grand Supreme Elder Yi Xian might leave after the auction is over. This news spread out at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, a group of powerhouses was flying towards the pavilion where Elder Xiaobai was. Among them was Master Moonless. However, it seemed like Master Moonless was only an attendant this time. When Yi Xian finally entered the private room, the auctioneer on the stage finally received the news and heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, Ling Xian Pavilion's internal auction usually didn't have a fixed time. As long as all the invited guests were present, the auction would begin. Sometimes, as long as the main invited guests were present, the auction would begin. After all, this was not a formal auction. It was just an internal auction. However, it was only the Grand Supreme Elders present. Only Yi Xian's not. It would have been fine if Elder Xiaobai hadn't received the message from the supervising elder, but Elder Xiaobai had received it. Thus, he could only helplessly ask the master to think of a way to stall for time. 2 hours? It wasn't a big deal for the Sky Celestial powerhouses present, but they couldn't just wait for no reason. Hence, the auctioneer used all his tricks to stall for time. He finally heaved a sigh of relief when Yi Xian arrived. Hee hee. Since everyone can't wait any longer, I won't waste any more of your time. Let's officially start the auction. The auctioneer was extremely excited. He could finally start normally. He couldn't wait to shoot everything in one go and end it quickly. However, at that moment, Elder Xiaobai's voice rang in his ears. Try to delay the auction as much as possible, especially the item that the Grand Supreme Elder wants. It must appear at the latest. However, you must not anger the Grand Supreme Elder. Yes, that was all he said. The auctioneer was so angry that he almost vomited blood. What was going on? They were trying to stall for time again. More importantly, they couldn't anger the Grand Supreme Elder. They still had to get the item that the Grand Supreme Elder wanted. Yi Xian wanted the mystical Waterblaze Stone, of course. Although the mystical Waterblaze Stone was a precious treasure to Yi Xian, it was only a medium-grade item in this auction. It was best to leave a medium-grade treasure behind without angering the Grand Supreme Elder. This auction was really testing the auctioneer's skills. The auctioneer was helpless. He could only explain the uses and functions of each item in detail. This way, it would be really troublesome and long. This kind of behavior undoubtedly caused the other people who were invited to complain. Fortunately, Yi Xian was new to the Divine Realm and didn't know many things. Hence, when the auctioneer introduced the items, Yi Xian listened with great interest. Of course, as long as Yi Xian was satisfied, Elder Xiaobai and the others could rest assured. As for the others? Forget it. Even if they offended everyone here, they couldn't afford to offend Yi Xian. The next item is called the Six Suns Stone. That's right, the Six Suns Stone is one of the essential materials for body tempering below the heavenly god realm. Adding the Six Suns Stone to the body will make one's physique stronger. What the hell? Who doesn't know about the Six Suns Stone? What's wrong with the auctioneer today? He even has to introduce the Six Suns Stone like this. The crowd in the hall was discussing animatedly. Isn't that so? Do we need the auctioneer to teach us how to use the Six Suns Stone? Which one of us doesn't have a few formulas related to the Six Suns Stone? Sigh, I think the auctioneer can forget about his job after this auction. He's dragging it out too much. As a veteran auctioneer, the auctioneer's expression changed when he heard this. However, at this moment, a voice rang out. Oh, Six Suns 3 Heart Soup? There's such a method of body tempering? Then, what other materials do we need? To be able to ask such a question, it was undoubtedly Yi Xian. When the auctioneer heard Yi Xian's voice, he immediately became interested. Not only did he begin to explain in detail, he even explained the rest of the materials, where to get them, how to use them for the best effect, and so on. Yi Xian listened with great interest. As for the others, they were getting impatient. However, the sharper ones had already noticed something unusual. Who's in that private room? Do you know? Chapter 21-24. Countless eyes were focused on the room Yi Xian was in. Their hearts were filled with questions. Finally, Master Moonless and the supervising elder of the area finally arrived at the pavilion after traveling at full speed. The auctioneer heaved a huge sigh of relief. There was no need to delay any longer. However, there were only a few items left in his hands. Without hesitation, he shouted out the item that Yi Xian wanted the most, The mystical water blazing stone. The next item is called the mystical water blazing stone. The starting price is 100,000 divine crystals. Each increment must not be lower than 10,000. Alright, let the auction begin. I bid 150,000. Sigh, this item is actually being auctioned now. Could it be that this mystical water blazing stone has become a valuable treasure? I bid 200,000. Anyway, that's all I can offer. I don't know what the auctioneer is doing. He actually put this item as the finale item. What a waste of time. That's right, that's right. Who wants it? Hurry up and take it. It's annoying just looking at it. Yi Xian finally got what he wanted. Hence, without hesitation, he shouted out the price. I bid 500,000. To be honest, this item might be ordinary to others, but to Yi Xian, it was a rare item. 500,000? In fact, it was definitely not worth that much. Normally it could even go up to 2 million, much less 500,000. However, the crowd was already in a mess. Who would care so much? Someone was about to bid, but was pulled back by someone beside him. Forget it, just give it to him. It's not like it's anything good. Look at him, he really wants it. Furthermore, don't forget that he's in the Divine Room 1. How could he have gotten it so easily? Even Yi Xian himself did not expect it to be so easy. It was not that Yi Xian did not participate in the bidding for the ancient demon finger. However, the competition was so fierce that Yi Xian gave up. Who would have thought that it would be so easy for the mystical water blazing stone to get it? Alright. 500,000. No one else is bidding. Then, congratulations to this young master for winning the auction. Weren't there 3 more people asking for the price? This film master was really interesting. Of course, this was a good thing for Yi Xian, so Yi Xian did not reject it. Just as the shoot ended, someone knocked on Yi Xian's door. Supreme Elder, may I come in? It was Elder Xiao Bai's voice. Yi Xian smiled. He had made a profit this time, so he was naturally in a good mood, so he said directly, "Come in. Grand Elder, a friend of yours is waiting for you in the inner hall. Please follow me." After Elder Xiao Bai came over, she didn't waste any time and directly said to Yi Xian, "My friend?" Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. He didn't seem to have any friends in the God realm. What was going on? Could it be that Hongmeng Xiaokei? However, even if Hongmeng Xiaokei came to find him, it shouldn't be in the capacity of a friend. Yi Xian frowned slightly and asked, "Who is my friend?" "Supreme Elder. You'll know when you get there." "Haha, Supreme Elder. Please follow me." Xiao Bai had a respectful smile on her face, but it was obvious that this time, there was even a hint of flattery. Although Yi Xian didn't know what was going on, he wanted to see who exactly Elder Xiao Bai's most feared friend was. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the inner hall of the Ling Xian Pavilion branch. The person who walked over made Yi Xian's heart skip a beat. The main character was here. Yes, it was the owner of the Grand Elder's token, Master Moonless. Could it be that he had used the badge of the Great Elder to participate in the auction and had even gotten Master Moonless out of it? Yi Xian looked at Moonless rather awkwardly. Of course there were others as well. "Master Yi, haha, it really is you. Master Yi, I didn't expect it to be you." Master Moonless was extremely excited. However, it made Yi Xian rather uncomfortable. What was in this guy's mind? Did he have to be so excited? Vice Pavilion Master, that's right. This is Yi Xian, Master Yi. My little life, as well as the people who were trapped there with me, was all thanks to Master Ye's help that we were able to leave. Master Moonless said respectfully to the person behind him. However, Yi Xian couldn't even see through that person's cultivation level. When Yi Xian asked for help from the system, the answer he got was, "Ding. System notification. Target's cultivation level is too high. Temporarily unable to detect." Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Damn, his cultivation level was so high that even the system couldn't detect it. What the hell? What kind of cultivation level was this person? Just as Yi Xian was sizing up the Deputy Pavilion Master, the Deputy Pavilion Master was also sizing up Yi Xian. "You are Yi Xian?" Facing such a powerful person, Yi Xian didn't dare to be disrespectful. He quickly bowed slightly and answered, "Yes, I am Yi Xian. Not bad, not bad. You're indeed young and promising. By the way, what stage are you in now? Trials? He actually knew about the trials. However, Yi Xian glanced at Master Moonless and understood why this person knew about them. I've just received the title of the Endless Refiner in the beginner trial. I'm temporarily out and preparing to go again after some time. Yi Xian didn't hide anything and answered directly. Obviously, that person's body stiffened when he heard this. Then, he stared at Yi Xian as if he wanted to see through Yi Xian. Good, good, good. You're indeed young and promising. Then, continue to work hard. Yi Xian was a little confused by the Deputy Pavilion Master's words. What was happening now was beyond Yi Xian's expectations. He didn't even understand what was going on. However, after the Deputy Pavilion Master finished speaking, he didn't continue speaking. Instead, Master Moonless ran over to Yi Xian. Haha, Grandmaster Yi, I'll have to trouble you this time. Here, this is the new identity token that Ling Xian Pavilion has prepared for you. You'd better return my token to me. Otherwise, I won't be able to command my former subordinates. Master Moonless lightly smiled as he handed over a purple token to Yi Xian. There were only 2 words on the token. Ling Xian. After all, the Grand Supreme Elder's token belonged to Master Moonless. Since Master Moonless had asked for it back, Yi Xian naturally couldn't keep it. Therefore, he didn't hesitate and directly handed the Grand Supreme Elder's token to Master Moonless. Chapter 21-25. However, Yi Xian did not reach out to take the token because he still did not understand what was going on. However, Master Ku seemed to be prepared. He directly stuffed the token into Yi Xian's hands and retreated to the side. Yi Xian was stunned. No, Master Ku, what do you mean by this? However, Master Ku only smiled mysteriously. Then, everyone from Ling Xian Pavilion, including Elder Xiaobai, instantly knelt in front of Yi Xian. Greetings, Pavilion Guardian Elder. What the hell? How did he become a Pavilion Guardian Elder? Moreover, it seemed that this Pavilion Guardian Elder was even more awesome than the Grand Supreme Elder. What was going on? Yi Xian was stunned and looked directly at Master Ku. Master Ku naturally understood what Yi Xian wanted to ask. Therefore, he did not beat around the bush and directly replied, Haha, Master Yi, just accept it. Do you know what my identity is in Ling Xian Pavilion? Yi Xian was stunned. Wasn't he just the Grand Supreme Elder? What other identity could he have? However, before Yi Xian could answer, Master Ku directly replied, Master Yi, perhaps you don't know other things, but I was trapped there for countless years. You should know this, right? In fact, other than my status as a Grand Elder, I am also the younger brother of the Ling Xian Court's Pavilion Master. Tell me, you saved his younger brother. As the elder brother, how could the Pavilion Master not appreciate it? Therefore, it's better for you to accept this Pavilion Guardian Elder token. After all, one of the 4 Pavilion Guardian Elders of Ling Xian Pavilion has already passed away after entering another mystery land. Another Pavilion Guardian Elder has also passed away due to exhaustion of his divine power. Ling Xian Pavilion only has 2 Pavilion Guardian Elders now. Of course, Master Yi, you don't have to doubt it. You are in charge of Restriction Pavilion. To be honest, you are the only Pavilion Guardian Elder in Restriction Pavilion. As for the other elders or disciples under you, there is not a single one. It wasn't until Master Moonless finished speaking that Yi Xian realized that Ling Xian Pavilion was trying to rope him in. Although he had only been given an empty shell, in reality, the benefits contained within this token were already boundless. Should Yi Xian refuse? How was that possible? As long as Yi Xian wasn't that stupid, he wouldn't refuse. In fact, he didn't have anything right now. If he could find a backer, it would be very beneficial for him. Although he did not know why Ling Xian Pavilion valued him so much, he believed that it was not simply because Master Moonless was the younger brother of their Pavilion Master. But what did this have to do with Yi Xian? If there were benefits to be had, then let's take them. Alright, since I don't belong to any sect now, it would be impolite to decline. Yi Xian replied. His answer instantly made everyone smile, including the Vice Pavilion Master. Of course, although Yi Xian had become Ling Xian Pavilion's Pavilion Guardian Elder, he did not even know what kind of power Ling Xian Pavilion was. All he knew was that Ling Xian Pavilion was an auction. As for the Pavilion Guardian Elder token in Yi Xian's hand, Yi Xian had merely treated it as a token that could give him a huge discount when he bought things. Yi Xian's participation was unavoidable, so Ling Xian Pavilion had to hold a banquet. This banquet lasted for 7 whole days. A banquet that lasted for 7 days was considered strange. After the Vice Pavilion Master, Master Moonless, and the others left, Yi Xian still felt like he was in a dream. This time, no matter what, he, Yi Xian, had picked up a huge bargain. Of course, this was also the so-called karma. If Yi Xian had not saved Master Moonless and the others at the first stage of the Valley of Despair, today's events would not have happened. After sorting out his emotions, Yi Xian would be a waste not to use his special privileges. He immediately asked Elder Xiao Bai to get him a large amount of body tempering materials. This time, he was prepared to temper his body properly so that he could attempt the endless trials again. Of course, Yi Xian still had to pay for these things from his own pocket. Therefore, he had used up all the millions of divine crystals that he had painstakingly obtained. However, the items that he had obtained could be considered generous. If he wanted to upgrade the 100-beast sword servant, he would need to devour points. At the moment, Yi Xian only had 2 devour points. There were very few things that he could do. For now, he could either upgrade the 100-beast sword servant or the battle god mount. After Yi Xian had broken through to the godly state, he had also summoned divine beast mounts. Therefore, the battle god mount could also be called a god grade mount. Due to a system error, the god grade mount had regressed to a silver grade mount. If it could be upgraded to a gold grade mount, its battle strength would undoubtedly increase by a lot. However, if Yi Xian chose to upgrade the 100-beast sword servant, it would be very useful. As previously mentioned, the mystical firestone could increase the toughness of the 100-beast sword servant. Then what exactly did it reflect on? For example, the cooldown of the summons. If he upgraded the battle god mount, then Yi Xian would be able to obtain enough strength in one go. On the other hand, if he upgraded the 100-beast sword servant, then Yi Xian would be able to summon more mounts in a short period of time. 2 choices. 2 conflicting choices. However, considering the needs of the trial, Yi Xian finally decided to upgrade the 100-beast sword servant. System: I want to use devour points and the mystical firestone to upgrade the 100-beast sword servant. Ding. Host has used the mystical firestone and consumed 2 devour points to upgrade the 100-beast sword servant. Ding. The resurrection time of the 100-beast sword servant has been reduced by half. The cooldown of the 100-beast sword servant's ultimate move, 100 Beasts Parade, has been reduced by half. Following the system notification, a satisfied smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. All his efforts had not been in vain. Finally, there was a return on investment. Reducing the cooldown by half meant that Yi Xian could use the 100-beast sword servant once every half a day. In that case, how useful would it be? The mechanism of the endless trial was to continuously strengthen the monsters, with each level stronger than the one before, until there were 1,000 monsters. Now that the cooldown of Yi Xian's 100-beast sword servant had been reduced, it meant that as long as Yi Xian controlled the speed of the trial, then he would be able to conserve a lot of energy each time he faced the strongest wave of 1,000 monsters. This undoubtedly increased Yi Xian's chances of passing the endless trial by many times. This was the result that Yi Xian wanted. Of course, apart from upgrading the 100-beast sword servant, the other items that Yi Xian had obtained were not completely useless. This time, the materials that Yi Xian had obtained were for refining the body. Furthermore, they could stimulate the potential of both the sword god bloodline and the battle god bloodline at the same time. Don't look at how this medicinal soup was something that Yi Xian had only exchanged for with divine crystals. However, it was extremely useful to Yi Xian. After soaking in the wooden barrel for an entire day as if he was taking a bath, Yi Xian finally absorbed all of the medicinal effects of the medicinal liquid. Ding. Host's sword god bloodline has grown. Ding. Host's battle god bloodline has grown. Ding. Host's battle strength has increased. Following the system notification, Yi Xian nodded slightly. Alright, the results were all within Yi Xian's grasp. There was even a pleasant surprise. Chapter 21-26. Yi Xian immediately took out a designated teleportation talisman, which was given to him by the guardian. After crushing it, he would be able to return to the endless trials. With a slight force in his hand, he crushed the teleportation talisman. In an instant, a mysterious array appeared under his feet. Then, in the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared. When Yi Xian opened his eyes again, he was already in the teleportation pavilion. "You're here. Are you ready to continue the trial?" The guardian's voice sounded. Yi Xian could not see where he was, but the voice seemed to indicate that the guardian had been staring at Yi Xian. "Yes, I'm ready." "Good, then you can go to the next level. I don't think I need to explain the rules. This time, it's the same. Before you obtain the title of Intermediate Trial Taker, you're not allowed to leave. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand." Yi Xian nodded. Of course, he understood the rules here. The guardian's voice did not sound again, and Yi Xian walked to the next level. It seemed that after the challenge, even the opponent had changed. This time, his opponent was still a divine beast, a monster of the devil ape type with 6 arms. Yi Xian did not know what its name was, so he just called it the 6 arms devil ape. The 6 arms devil ape had extremely fast speed. At the same time, each of its 6 arms held 6 different magic treasures. There were no more and no less, 3 offensive and 3 defensive treasures. On this level, Yi Xian was only facing one, and its cultivation level was only at the peak intermediate true god realm. Therefore, this was the opportunity for Yi Xian to understand the 6 arms devil ape. He took a step forward and left the staircase. In an instant, the 6 arms devil ape sensed him. Roar! Roar! The 6 arms devil ape roared. At the same time, a bowl-shaped magic treasure in its hand emitted a strong light and attacked Yi Xian. What a strong pressure. This light seems to be used to suppress my movement. Moreover, this kind of strength is just right for a peak mid-true god to possess. Yi Xian silently analyzed in his heart. Of course, such a strong pressure wouldn't affect Yi Xian too much. However, even so, Yi Xian did not immediately kill the 6 arms demon ape. Instead, he quietly waited for the 6 arms demon ape to attack. The main purpose of choosing this level was to first grasp the strength of the 6 arms demon ape so that it would be more convenient for the later battles. The 6 arms demon ape didn't seem to have much intelligence. After the first attack was launched, the second attack was launched almost instantly. It was still a ray of light, but it was condensed together. Furthermore, the light this time around was no longer as simple as oppressive might. Instead, it had turned into a truly powerful attack. Corrosive ability? No, in addition to corrosion, it also has the ice attribute. This attack can slow down my movement speed and corrode my divine power. Yi Xian felt it slightly and already knew the effect of this attack. In that case, I can't say that I'll be delayed for too long in the later stages. After all, once the 6 arms demon ape is formed, this kind of attack will become a huge test. Yi Xian frowned slightly. However, he was thinking about the test in the later stages. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll never be defeated. This wasn't because Yi Xian was a coward. This was the realm of the gods. Even if it was just a trial monster, Yi Xian had never seen it before. Therefore, Yi Xian had to familiarize himself with these monsters. Not only because of this place, but also because of the entire realm of the gods. Now, Yi Xian was continuously accumulating experience. Very quickly, the 6 arms demon ape's attack methods were completely understood by Yi Xian. Now, it was time to test this fellow's defensive methods. The 100 Beast Sword Attendant had to be used at the 1000 Beasts level. Megatron could be used, but not now. Therefore, Yi Xian still only pulled out the Godslayer and attacked the 6 arms demon ape. Eat my sword. This time, Yi Xian only used a normal attack. Unexpectedly, the 6 arms demon ape waved its hand casually and used a long sword to block Yi Xian's attack. Not bad, not bad. Although I didn't use the Godslayer's skill to attack this time, I used 80% of my strength. It seems that this fellow's strength isn't as weak as it looks. Alright now, it's time to start the slaughter. Yi Xian felt that he had grasped the 6 arms demon ape's general ability, so he didn't hesitate. The Godslayer released a burst of intense light. Yi Xian had already made his move. Deicide slash. Boom. The critical hit effect appeared. Although it didn't kill in one hit, the effect of 10 times the critical hit was no different from killing in one hit. In an instant, the 6 arms demon ape in front of Yi Xian was killed, turning into a ray of white light and disappearing. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and directly stepped onto the next level. It could be said that after understanding the strength of the 6 arms demon ape, even though it was clearly at a higher level than Yi Xian, it couldn't stop Yi Xian's advance at all. In front of Yi Xian, the 6 arms demon apes were killed one by one, and Yi Xian's advance became firmer and firmer. Have I reached the last level of the peak true god stage? At this time, Yi Xian stood at the top of the stairs and looked at the densely packed 6 arms demon apes in front of him. 1,000, such a large number. However, what was the use? Could it be that he wanted to rely on these 6 arms demon apes to stop Yi Xian's advance? 100 Beast Sword Attendant, come out for me. Yi Xian finally used his trump card. As soon as he summoned the 100 Beast Sword Attendant, he didn't hesitate and directly let the 100 Beast Sword Attendant use the 100 Beasts Walk, summoning 100 divine mounts at the same time. In an instant, 100 silver-level divine mounts appeared and pounced on the 6 arms demon apes without hesitation. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was unlucky this time. Among the 100 divine mounts, there wasn't a single gold-level divine mount. There wasn't even a single gold-level divine mount, let alone a platinum-level one. This is interesting. This little guy still has such a trump card. Suddenly, the voice of the gatekeeper was heard. This voice made Yi Xian's body stiffen slightly. The gatekeeper was definitely a super existence that Yi Xian couldn't defeat. However, when he was trying to break through the levels, the gatekeeper had never interfered with him. But now, why did he suddenly speak? Could it be that external forces weren't allowed here? Yi Xian was puzzled, but he didn't ask. However, the gatekeeper seemed to have seen through Yi Xian's thoughts and directly said, "Young man, don't worry. The beasts you summoned can be considered as part of your own strength, so they are considered to be reasonable. I'm just a little curious about your beasts. When you obtain the Intermediate Endless Trials title, you can also obtain a reward. Young man, work hard. I have a reward that is very suitable for your current skill. If you can pass this test, then I'll give you this reward." Chapter 21-27. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. What did the Guardian mean? What did he mean by a reward that was suitable for his current skill? The skill that the Guardian was referring to was Yi Xian using the 100 Beast Sword Servant's ultimate move to summon 100 silver-grade divine beasts mounts. Then, what was the reward that he was referring to? Of course, although Yi Xian was puzzled, he knew that he would be able to take advantage of the situation this time. As long as he could obtain the title of Intermediate Trial Taker, no matter what the Guardian was referring to, it would become Yi Xian's. Presumably, the Guardian would not tease Yi Xian. Then let's fight. Let's fight hard, no matter what the Guardian gave Yi Xian. All the rewards could only be obtained after Yi Xian obtained the title of Intermediate Trial Taker. Therefore, Yi Xian could only fight with all his might. The Endless Trial Taker was called endless because it would not give you any time to rest. If you wanted to fight slowly and drag out the time, that was impossible because there was a time limit to the battle. If you wanted to end the battle quickly and use the free time to take a break, this was also impossible, because there was a limit to the amount of time that could pass after the battle had ended. Endless Trial Taker. Endless Slaughter. Yi Xian's eyes were bloodshot. He did not even know how many monsters he had killed with his own hands. Kill. Endless slaughter. There was only battle. Non-stop battle. Moreover, the higher he went, the stronger the monsters were. Fortunately, the God-slaying sword was able to effectively suppress these monsters, which was why Yi Xian wasn't in any danger along the way. Superior Grade 1 True God Pass. Superior Grade 5 True God Pass. Superior Grade Peak True God Pass. At this moment, Yi Xian was facing a first-grade Heavenly God opponent. A first-grade Heavenly God 6 arms demon ape. Good lad, you're the first one I've met in 3 million years with such speed. What was the name of the last one who could maintain such speed? Oh right, I think it was Fei Yu or something. Not bad, not bad. Your performance is not bad. The voice of the Guardian sounded again. This time, it was directly praising Yi Xian. This was a rare occurrence. Yi Xian didn't reply. He wasn't in the mood to do so right now. Ever since the start of the intermediate trial, Yi Xian had been challenging monsters of a higher level than him. In the previous level, he had even fought with 1,000 upper-class true gods. If Yi Xian were to say that he could easily defeat such a powerful opponent, it would be impossible. Even though the God-Slayer was able to effectively suppress the monsters, with each strike being able to deal critical damage, and from time to time being able to kill in one hit, and with the addition of the 100 Beast Sword Servants, the battle was still very difficult. Without mentioning anything else, this battle lasted for a full 5 days. Yi Xian even summoned the sword servants of the 100 beasts a total of 10 times. It was obvious how difficult this battle was. In fact, not only was Yi Xian tired, but he was also injured all over. In the previous stage, Yi Xian had been in danger several times. He had almost lost his life a few times. Fortunately, the more serious his injuries were, the more the Battle of the Worlds increased. However, there was no end in sight to this battle. The endless trial, as its name suggested, was endless. Just the continuous appearance of opponents was enough to make those with weak willpower despair. Yi Xian's willpower wasn't weak, but that didn't mean that he was feeling good right now. At this time, Yi Xian even thought of giving up. Difficult. It was really too difficult. This endless refinement could be said to have allowed Yi Xian to experience what true endless was, what endless slaughter was. However, could Yi Xian give up? No, because this was part of the system repair mission. Yi Xian could only grit his teeth and continue. Furthermore, if others could complete the trial, why couldn't Yi Xian complete it? It was only the intermediate trial now. There were still advanced and even higher levels. Could it be that Yi Xian couldn't even pass the intermediate trial? No, Yi Xian didn't believe it. He didn't believe that he only had this much strength. Kill! Yi Xian suddenly roared. At this time, the 100 Beast Sword Attendant and the Divine Mount were in cooldown. The Withered Bone Sword Attendant was useless. The same went for Wei Zhentian. It was useless. Everything depended on Yi Xian. Roar! Roar! The 6 Arms Demon Ape seemed to be very excited. With a wave of its hand, another powerful aura descended on Yi Xian. In just an instant, Yi Xian felt as if he was being suppressed by a mountain. He couldn't move an inch. Was this really a first stage Heavenly God 6 Arms Demon Ape? This was a super opponent that surpassed Yi Xian by 2 whole realms. Yi Xian was only a mere intermediate true god. Moreover, he was only a 4th stage true god. Moreover, he had already gone through so many killings. He was already mentally and physically exhausted. Rewards. Titles. Yi Xian couldn't care less about them now. Right now, he was just relying on his tenacious willpower to fight. Boom! A strong force came, and Yi Xian was sent flying by the 6 Arms Demon Ape. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. At this time, Yi Xian felt as if all the bones in his body were about to shatter. He was so powerless and so tired. Was it going to end just like that? Could it be that he really couldn't pass? In fact, would he even die here? No, he couldn't. Yi Xian couldn't accept defeat. He couldn't accept defeat like this. At this time, his eyes suddenly opened. No, I won't admit defeat. So what if you're a heavenly god? Yi Xian will kill you all the same. Spiritual control. Suddenly, Yi Xian let out a loud roar. His divine sense suddenly condensed and attacked the 6 Arms Demon Ape at the Heavenly God stage. Hoping to control the 6 Arms Demon Ape with spiritual control? That was almost impossible. In fact, not to mention the Heavenly God stage 6 Arms Demon Ape. Even before this, Yi Xian hadn't used the spiritual sense control. As for the reason was very simple. These monsters in the Tower of Trials weren't real entities. They were just illusionary projections. If they didn't even have a real body, how could they have a spirit? How could Yi Xian possibly think that he could subdue them with spiritual control? However, when Yi Xian's spiritual sense made a move, the result was beyond his expectations. He actually succeeded? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this time, he stared blankly at the 6 Arms Demon Ape that he had temporarily controlled. What was this? This thing had clearly disappeared with a puff of white smoke after it was killed. What? She could control him with her spiritual sense? It was over so easily? Yi Xian casually swung his sword and killed the 6 Arms Demon Ape without any suspense. However, Yi Xian felt as if he was dreaming. This was clearly the most difficult battle, but it had turned out to be the easiest battle. This made Yi Xian a little unable to react. Hey kid, you're just a mid-level true god. How could you have such a technique? Let me see. Spiritual control? Not the art of puppetry? Not spiritual control, either? What's going on? As far as I know, very few people have mastered spiritual control. Moreover, it's impossible for anyone below the true god realm to master it. How did you do it? The gatekeeper suddenly spoke, startling Yi Xian from his daze. Chapter 21-28. Yi Xian had obtained this spiritual sense control through the system skill fusion. How could he have known so much? At this moment, after hearing the Guardian's words, he realized that this spiritual sense control actually had a great background. However, this could not explain the doubts in Yi Xian's heart. Why was spiritual sense control able to control the 6-arms demon ape? However, in front of the Guardian, Yi Xian certainly did not have the right to ask. In fact, even if he did ask, the Guardian would simply ignore him. All right, kid. You've passed this level. Congratulations on obtaining the Intermediate Trial Taker title. It seems that this ordinary endless trial is not a problem for you. I can only activate the special level. The Guardian seemed to be muttering to himself in the latter half of his sentence. As for Yi Xian, he didn't know what he meant by that. After a moment, the Guardian continued speaking. Kid, since the establishment of this endless tower, the special level has only been activated twice. And you are the third person to do so. I don't know if this is your good fortune or bad luck. You're on your own now. Alright, by the way, let me tell you something. The first 2 people failed. If I had not stepped in to save them, they would not have been able to keep their lives. This time, I am powerless to help you. You're on your own now. I'll teleport you over now. This time, you will have 3 days to rest. Of course, you can choose to leave temporarily and come back to challenge in the future. After all, if you succeed in this challenge, you will directly obtain the unique Supreme Trial Taker title. Hearing this, Yi Xian could not help but frown. What kind of challenge would allow him to skip so many challenges and directly obtain the Supreme Trial Taker title? Furthermore, it was a unique title. In other words, the challenge this time was equivalent to directly clearing the trial tower? Yi Xian frowned and felt a little uneasy. Not to mention anything else, at least one thing was certain, and that was that the difficulty of this challenge was extremely high. It could even be said that it was several times more difficult than any of the challenges Yi Xian had faced before. However, at the same time, this was also an opportunity for Yi Xian, a rare opportunity. Of course, before the teleportation, Yi Xian did not forget what the gatekeeper had said. Gatekeeper, you said that you would give me a reward if I passed this level. What is the reward? Haha, brat, you actually still remember this matter? Do you know what you will obtain once you pass the sovereign level trial? You actually care about such a small reward. To you, it might be something insignificant, but to me, it's not that simple. Being able to increase my strength by a bit is already enough for me. Yi Xian said calmly. Brat, you're quite direct. Alright, this reward is something you deserve anyway. So accept it. Suddenly, a ball of light emerged from the tower and appeared in front of Yi Xian. This is your reward. Next you can choose for yourself. I'll leave the portal here for you. You can enter whenever you want. I'm too lazy to set a time limit for you. After all, you're the only one who can challenge that place in 1,000,000 years. I'll give you some special privileges. I'm sure that even if my master finds out, he won't say anything. The voice of the gatekeeper was filled with vicissitudes of life. Perhaps he was thinking of his master. Of course, this had nothing to do with Yi Xian. Yi Xian casually took the ball of light. The light quickly gathered in Yi Xian's hand. Not long after, it turned into a small box. This box was very exquisite. Both the material and the workmanship were exceptionally exquisite. Although Yi Xian did not know what it was, he knew that this box was definitely not simple. Ding! System notification. Discovered special material, Eternal Night Treasure Box. Ding! System notification. Discovered special material, 1,000 souls. The 2 consecutive system prompts caused Yi Xian to be slightly stunned. Eternal Night Treasure Box? 1,000 souls? What are these things? System, appraise this Eternal Night Treasure Box and 1,000 souls. I want to see what this gatekeeper left for me. Yi Xian said to the system. Soon, he heard the sound of the system successfully appraising. At the same time, the appearance of these 2 items was finally revealed to Yi Xian. Eternal Night Treasure Box. Special Treasure Box. Only one function. Eternal Night Preservation. The description was that simple. However, Yi Xian saw some clues from the word Eternal Night. In fact, there were many different types of treasures. Their characteristics were also different. Among them, There were some treasures that could not see the slightest bit of light and could not be affected by the outside world. Yi Xian remembered that he had heard of a magical material called the 10 Generations Wonder Flower. This flower was very strange. It appeared on a fixed day every year. Of course, the exact day was different for each flower. The time of appearance was fixed, but the location was not fixed. It could be in a forest, on a volcano, in the sky, in the sea, or even in the void. Such a magical item was very difficult to obtain. Not to mention the current Yi Xian, even the gods who were much more powerful than Yi Xian might not be able to obtain it. Of course, even if they obtained it, they might not be able to store it. This was because this item could not be tainted with the slightest bit of mortal aura. Even god power could not be tainted. Therefore, it was not easy to discover such a precious treasure. It was not certain whether one could obtain it after discovering it. Even if one obtained it, it would be useless without the means to store it. This Eternal Night treasure box was such a rare treasure. It could be said that Yi Xian had already profited greatly from this Eternal Night treasure box. Moreover, there was an even more important treasure inside. 1,000 Souls. Yes, that was the name. 1,000 Souls only had one attribute, and that was that it contained 1,000 blank god-level souls. What kind of concept was that? Yi Xian only thought about it for a moment before he was so shocked that he did not know what to say. Simply put, this guardian god was going to bestow god-level souls to Yi Xian's god-level mounts. Yi Xian's current god-level mounts were, frankly speaking, just beasts. Moreover, they were summoned at random. Strictly speaking, they were very unstable. However, if these